Star Wars, Silver Oath. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 Intelligence Trading. The person Liu is looking for is named Chen Zhuanghan. This name is well known in the Silver Knights and even in the underground world of the entire Dry Galaxy. But apart from the name, almost everything is hidden in the fog. When it comes to Chen Zhuanghan, most people's reaction is, oh, that's a very powerful person. Ah, you ask me why I'm so powerful? He is just very powerful. If you don't believe me, ask that person over there. I must know. What? He doesn't know. It's so awesome. Why do you have so many problems? Only a few people know about it. Gan is an information businessman. To be precise, he is an information dealer who knows almost everything. Everything in the Khan Galaxy seemed to have no secrets for him. As long as he could afford the price, he could satisfy all the guests' requirements. Of course, this description is an exaggeration, but there is no doubt that Chen Zhuanghan is one of the most powerful intelligence traders in the underground world. It's just that this information businessman has a weird hobby. He sells information without asking for money or goods, only reciprocal information. I tell you a story you don't know, and you have to tell me a story I don't know. This is only fair. This so-called fairness is certainly not fair, but obviously when people ask for something from him, it is impossible to care whether it is fair or not. In the past, Liu had several fairly peaceful transactions with Chen Zhuanghan and established a friendship that allowed him to ask each other out for drinks. Liu said, "Go faster, that person named Chen never likes to wait for others." They did not take a step, but said in a solemn voice, "According to the rules you set for me, when you try to before meeting with Chen Zhuanghan, I must give you 3 warnings." Liu stopped and said, "Oh, yes, there is such a procedure. Come on. Chen Zhuanghan is extremely dangerous. Are you sure that you are not allowed to meet with him? Will it endanger my own safety?" Liu said, "Asking him to meet in Ziyajing is a constraint for both of us. Anyone who makes trouble here will only lose out. Besides, I didn't ask you to carry ZHU wrong on purpose this time. Module, so security can be guaranteed." Bei added, "Chen Zhuanghan's information is expensive. Are you sure you can afford it?" Liu said, "Of course, I don't fight with uncertainty. I already have enough valuable information to trade with him." Bei then gave a final warning. "Chen Zhuanghan's information rarely brings good things. Are you sure you are willing to accept that result?" Liu sighed. "It doesn't matter. I can probably guess what the worst outcome will be." After 3 warnings, Bei said no more and silently turned on the navigation for Liu. "Turn right ahead, and then go all the way forward." The tavern where Liu made an appointment with an intelligence businessman named Chen Zhuanghan was not far away. 10 minutes later, Liu came to a tavern located deep in a back alley. This is probably one of the most dilapidated taverns in the entire Ziyajingnan city. As soon as you enter the door, a mist of low-quality tobacco hits your face, and the air is filled with a disgusting smell. The wine cabinet behind the bar contained only the cheapest bad wine. Even the TV hanging next to the wine cabinet had a cracked screen. The pictures and sounds were distorted and broken, making Zia, who is famous for his sweet smile and professional broadcasting skills, the image of the female host of Beijing News, has become particularly ridiculous. After Liu entered the door, he was not surprised at all. He found a stained booth with a relaxed expression, and then sat down on his back. Almost the next moment he sat down, a gottle man of medium stature and a conical head sat opposite him. Liu couldn't help but feel happy when he saw it. It's actually a gottle this time. With the surname Chen, you are getting more and more evil. For those who have dealt with Chen Zhuanghan many times, it is very clear. Chen Zhuanghan never sees people with their true colors. He will only appoint an agent to meet with the buyer. Even if the conversation is through a holographic projection, the image presented to the buyer will never be fixed. But I don't know how he does it. The agent who is assigned will always be able to provide services that satisfy buyers. Only this time, Liu didn't expect that Chen Zhuanghan would find a gottle as his Hispakespisson. ever since a group of Gotels mysteriously disappeared in Li about 100 years ago, but the Kyankan group has never given a reasonable explanation. The Gotels have lost trust in the Kyan galaxy. As of now, this keen race has become almost extinct, and it is even less likely to be used by the locals. The man named Chen Zuangan, however, had no interest in chatting with Li Yu, and asked straight to the point, "What do you want to know?" Li Yu did not rush to ask questions, but waved to the bored middle-aged bartender behind the bar to bring it to him. Drinks? Based on his experience in dealing with Chen Zuangan several times in the past, Li Yu must pay all his attention and consider every word carefully at this time, otherwise he is likely to lose everything. Chen Zuangan is a businessman with great magical powers, and at the same time, he is an absolutely treacherous businessman, perfectly insulated from qualities such as honesty and reliability. Of course, it doesn't mean that there is anything wrong with Chen Zuangan's information. As an intelligence businessman, Chen Zuangan's information must be complete and thoughtful enough, almost tailor-made for buyers. But on the other hand, when Chen Zuangan asks for a price, he will never limit himself to the story provided by the seller. During the meeting between the two parties, everything the buyer said, and it was actually nourishment that Chen Zuangan was absorbing. Many buyers accidentally expose a big secret that they need to hide when making appeals. And the intelligence dealer who gets the secret will never have any obligation to keep it secret. As far as Li Yu knew, such a tragedy had happened in the past. The child of a certain big shot was kidnapped, so he asked Chen Zuangan to provide information about the kidnapper. Chen Zuangan gave all the information about the kidnapper and even designed a reliable rescue plan for him. But during the transaction, Chen Zuangan keenly guessed the many trump cards in the buyer's hands, based on the buyer's requirements, and then sold them to the big shot's competitor. As a result, although the big man successfully rescued his children, his entire family and business were defeated by competitors in one fell swoop, and they have been in decline ever since. Li Yu knew very well what a special existence the Silver Knights were in the Kyan galaxy. In order to fight for the interests of the abandoned area, the Silver Knights were not afraid of becoming enemies with anyone. They not only hunted down the evil-doing Suzaku pirates, but also fought against the Kyankan group, the orthodox ruler of the galaxy. The cost of making enemies on all sides is that there are malicious sides from all directions. As soon as he shows his flaws, they will swarm him. If he is not careful, he will be shattered into pieces together with the entire people in the abandoned area. Li Yu pondered for a moment and said, "Not long ago, a pirate attack occurred on DUI 4399. I want to know the current situation of the survivors who stayed in the manor." Chapter 102 News Interview. Hearing Li Yu's question, the Gotaman codenamed Chen Zuangan immediately responded, "Most of the servants are still alive. Although they are under house arrest, they will be able to leave soon, such as Miss Nan Wuiao's former personal maid Li Kaiang." Li Yu asked, "So, apart from the so-called majority of people, what about the others?" Chen Zuangan said, "Unfortunately, they can't leave, because they have discovered the secret of Kyankan security that cannot be seen by others." Li Yu nodded, which was in line with his guess. In fact, he even knew what the so-called secret that cannot be seen by others was. The memory card that he took away from the underground base of the manor when he accepted Nan Wuiao's commission and drove the silver ship was probably storing the most secret of the manor. If during the attack, the people in the manor ran to the underground base for refuge and saw the facilities and equipment in it, or even peeked at the information that they should not see, then with the style of Kyankan group, it is indeed impossible to let them go free. But this is not the point. The point is, there should be a very special person among those people. Li Yu carefully considered his words. It should be a woman, and however, before Li Yu finished speaking, he was interrupted by the Gota people. "Are you talking about this person?" Li Yu was stunned for a moment, then raised his head and looked at the old and distorted TV on the bar. The news anchor, who looked funny because of the distorted picture, was reading the news release in an orderly manner. Next to her, there were pictures sent from other news scenes, in which a woman in a white robe could be vaguely seen. Because the TV was too old, her real face could not be seen clearly. Fortunately, the host's voice was still clear. "There is new progress in the investigation of the murder of Nanming Capital Chairman Nan Heli. Kyankan security said that the previous investigation results were just a deliberate illusion created by the perpetrator. The real murderer was not Nanhelli's family servant, but someone else. And the person who investigated all this was a person from outside the Kyan star system. At this time, the TV seemed to have a sudden inspiration and finally resumed normal operation for a moment. The picture and sound were extremely clear, allowing you to see the scene next to the host. A woman with deep and sharp eyes appeared in the middle of the picture. Her face was filled with a relaxed smile, but her eyes were so deep that they seemed to be able to absorb people's souls. The next moment, the host revealed her identity. This is the Jedi Master from the Republic, Mostima. At the same time, in the omnivore bar in the deserted area, a sturdy miner was burping and said, "Anyway, this is all I know about the story of the dragon man you are asking about. Although I personally have no problem with those people with horns on their heads. When I lived in the city before, I avoided those people born with deformities as much as possible, and many bad boys would throw stones at them. After all, it is said that encountering them is unlucky. Hey, are you listening?" The miner stretched out his broad palm and waved it in front of the good-looking boy opposite him who invited him to drink and tell stories, but found that the other party's attention had long been locked on a noisy large-screen TV next to the bar. The miner turned his head and frowned, complaining in his heart that some idiot was too drunk and lost his mind to change the TV program, replacing the originally good-looking Space City Idol song and dance with the empty and boring Ziyajing news. People living in the wasteland have never liked those news programs that are monotonous and eulogize. The world will never become better because of the exaggeration of news programs. On the contrary, everything they swear to praise will only make people living in the real world feel more miserable. No matter how beautiful and amiable the host is, it can't change this. If the Kyan star system is really as beautiful as the Ziyajing news portrays, why are so many people forced to live in the wasteland? And the content of this news is even more boring. Is there any new progress in the truth of Nanhelli's death? Who cares about the truth of the death of the upper class? Anyway, it's nothing more than the power struggle of the powerful class. Who lives and who dies has nothing to do with the people living at the bottom. After all, whoever goes up will not make the people below live better. But the boy in front of the miner stared at the TV screen intently, his body motionless, as if his breathing was stagnant. Next to the TV, a drunk drinker, impatient to listen to the host's words, staggered over to change the channel. But as soon as he approached the TV, he felt as if a basin of cold water was poured over his head. Inexplicably, he felt a chill in his heart, as if he walked any further, something extremely terrifying would happen. The drunk had suddenly sobered up halfway, and he looked around in confusion, wanting to know if someone had done something to him, but in the end he found nothing. It seemed that he was the only strange person in the entire pub. He couldn't figure it out, so he had to pay the bill and leave, regretting that he had drunk too much just now. In fact, everyone in the pub who tried to walk over and interrupt the news program felt the same fear. So even though no one liked to watch Ziyajing's news, the boring news program continued to be broadcast. According to the investigation results of the Jedi Master, the mastermind behind the death of Chairman Nanhelli is likely to be from outside the Kyan galaxy. As we all know, Nanming Capital, as a giant enterprise in the galaxy, has always shouldered the important responsibility of maintaining the capital order of the galaxy. If there is foreign capital that wants to stir up trouble in the Kyan galaxy, it must pass the Nanming Capital test. In the past countless years, Nanming Capital has withstood many crises for us, so it has become a thorn in the eyes of outsiders. Although the board miner did not like the news program, since no one changed the channel, he could only listen to it all the way, and at this point, he could not help but snort with disdain. It is not new that the Republic has ill intentions towards us. They say they are member states, but they have never treated us as their own people. I think the death of Nanhelli is most likely the work of the Republic, don't you think? The miner boldly expressed his guess, and then wanted to seek the approval of others, but when he turned around, he found that the good-looking boy had disappeared without a trace. After the young man left, the environment in the tavern finally returned to normal. Someone in the noisy crowd immediately shouted, "Change the channel." The nearest drinkers immediately rushed over to cut off the news program. At this time, the host with a sweet smile on his face had just finished reading the last sentence. During this period, the GD Master received great assistance from the Silver Knights. Chapter 103 disappeared from the face of the earth. When Li Yu hurried back to his hometown in the deserted area from the capital planet, Kun, he received bad news as expected. You are the so-called elite of the Silver Knights, enjoying the privilege of self-financing. Everyone lives 10 or 100 times more freely and luxuriously than any other member, even than me. In the end, you can't even do such a simple task of looking after the children. In the underground base of the Red Apricot team, Li Yu had a rare gloomy face, looking down at the incompetent team members. As the captain of the Red Apricot team, Enping naturally had an obligation at this time to stand up and face the boss's anger. He tried to raise his head, but before he could speak, he was blocked by Li Yu. Stop talking nonsense. I don't need to hear you apologize and admit your mistakes. Now tell me, where did Scene go? Enping opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. After Scene disappeared strangely, he immediately started searching. As the captain of the Red Apricot squad, he had enough powerful resources in the wasteland to lay a net to control a mere newcomer. In fact, this was the reason why Zubo dared to leave his post and let Scene go. With the ability of that young boy, how far could he run even if he ran? In this wasteland full of nets, he would be caught sooner or later. And after being caught, maybe he could become more honest. As a result, it turned out that all of them seemed to have underestimated Scene's ability to act. When he wanted to leave desperately, the so-called net of the Red Apricot squad could not stop him at all. Before Li Yu arrived, Enping and others had already frantically questioned every possible insider, but everyone said that they had not seen Scene during this period. The last person who saw Scene was the miner in the Omnivore Tavern. Comparing his confession with the confessions of others, Enping despaired that Scene seemed to have disappeared after leaving the tavern. God knows how he did it. This is a wasteland. The biggest feature of the wasteland is that it is a mixed environment. This mixed environment provides a natural concealment ability, but on the other hand, in such an environment, people as eccentric as Scene will be particularly conspicuous. From top to bottom, every resident of the wasteland will not miss a teenager like Scene. As a result, it was in such a wasteland that Scene disappeared. Li Yu looked at the silent Enping and sneered. You have been working under me for more than a year. When did I say nonsense when assigning tasks? I want you to lock him up in the base, because once he leaves the base, you guys may no longer be able to control him, but you really let him run away. Enping was ashamed and had to lower his head. Zubo tried to explain. Something happened in the base at that time, and Xiao Zhuang suddenly fell ill and was just seen by Scene. We were also worried that he would develop extreme emotions if he stayed in the base all the time, so why not let him go to the Omnivore Tavern event? This was the truth. After Zhuang Yuanying went crazy, although everyone acted calm, they were still a little uneasy in their hearts. They were worried about Zhuang Yuanying and Scene. Especially since Scene spent the whole day in the database. It was like facing the calm before the storm. Zubo and Enping played cards all night, in fact, to prevent Scene from doing something unexpected. According to their estimation, a young man like Scene, who has a positive mind and burns like a torch, can't stand the dark side of society the most. And the darkness carried by Zhuang Yuanying is enough to stimulate a normal person to go crazy. After listening to Zubo's explanation, Li Yu sneered a few times and asked, "It's a good idea. Who did you send to accompany Scene when you let him go out to relax?" Zubo immediately lowered his head and shut up, took a half step back, and sold out the captain Enping. Enping was speechless and had nothing to say. He had been boxing with Scene and was so weak that he couldn't recover for several days. Then he played cards with Zubo all night. He was really exhausted physically and mentally. He slept soundly the next morning and didn't think about sending someone to follow Scene. Seeing such an incompetent reaction, Li Yu was so angry that he wanted to draw his gun and shoot this useless captain on the spot, but in the end he waved his hand and turned away. In this situation, what would it matter if Enping was shot? He still had to go to the trouble of finding the successor captain of the Red Apricot squad. And let alone Enping, even he himself could not have expected that things would suddenly change so dramatically. Thinking of that ridiculous Ziyajing news, it's no wonder that Scene couldn't stay. But the problem is that, although the boy walked happily, he didn't think that there was probably no way back ahead, or even if he thought about it, he didn't care. It's rare to see you seriously worry about someone. The assistant beside him suddenly spoke. Liu said, yes, I'm really worried about that boy. Now even my appetite is poor. Put one less fried wild chicken in my lunchbox at noon. Why? Bei couldn't understand. As Liu's personal assistant, Bei knew better than anyone that under Liu's enthusiastic appearance, there was a rational heart that was far colder than that of ordinary people. He might love every member of the Silver Knights, or even the entire wasteland, but he would never invest too much emotion in any individual. When it comes to interest judgment and power calculation, all people are just cold data to him. This was not Liu's original intention, but when he took over the position of leader of the Silver, he had to become ruthless, because this was a basic survival rule of the wasteland, and now it seems that Liu's concern for Scene has obviously exceeded the necessary rational standards. This is very strange. Is it worth it for just Scene? In response to Bei's question, Liu sighed and replied, you ask why? If he is just a boy named Scene, with a slightly mysterious origin, well, it doesn't seem so mysterious now, and a young man with amazing talent, then it is indeed not worth my spending too much time on it. But this matter is obviously not just about Scene. I ask you, when did the members of the Red Apricot Squad have the ability to escape from the wasteland? Bei was silent for a moment, and then suddenly realized. As the most special force in the Silver Knights, the Red Apricot Squad has collected the most special personnel in the entire wasteland. Although most of the time, this team performs extremely well and can do what others cannot. On the other hand, these people are often extremely difficult to control, and they will turn against their masters if they are not careful. Liu can make Enping, Lunan and others willingly call him bossly, and the effort he has put in is far beyond the imagination of outsiders. On the other hand, for the Red Apricot Squad, Liu has always maintained extremely strict control measures and secret. In fact, setting up the base of the Red Apricot Squad underground was already a semi-confined management method. And around the base, Liu's spies were countless, and no member of the team could escape Liu's sight. And Ping's so-called dragnet, which he was proud of, was only a small part of Liu's network. As a result, the newcomer that Liu valued the most recently disappeared without a trace in full view of everyone. Chapter 104, Going Alone. Liu looked at the members of the Red Apricot team and asked in a cold voice, besides, don't you think it's too coincidental? Just when that kid went to the Omnivore to collect intelligence, a news program that was enough to drive him crazy suddenly appeared on TV. What a joke. I have been running the Omnivore Tavern for more than 10 years. How come I never knew that the people there were still interested in watching official news? And just now we asked everyone who was present at the time, and no one knew who changed the channel. Liu's words were already tainted with rare anger, which made Bei warn again. You are in danger of acting on your emotions now. Liu waved his hand. No, the effect of the hangover medicine you just injected has not passed, and I can't act on my emotions, even if I want to. In fact, if you think about it, you should know that, even if the TV program is just a coincidence, it is definitely not a coincidence that Scene can run away without anyone noticing. And until now we can't get any news about him, it is even more impossible to be a coincidence. I don't believe that the kid can escape from my territory alone. Bei asked back, then who do you think is helping him? Liu said, you are asking, even though you know the answer. In this land, the only ones who are qualified and courageous to do things without telling me are that family. Liu pointed to the top of his head and a self-deprecating smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. After all, the wasteland is not an independent kingdom. It's just a cyst that parasitizes Namsao City. Bei continued to ask, why do you think they kidnapped Scene? Liu said, I don't know, and I can't think of it for now. But it can't be a good thing. Otherwise, why can't you say it directly to me? Why do you have to do it so sneakily? Kidnapping my elite team members on my territory, no matter how lightly you say it, is a direct provocation to me. And if they didn't have any ill intentions towards us, why would they provoke me so blatantly? Bei said, maybe you are just overthinking it all. Liu said, maybe the great thanks to the Silver Knights in that press release are also sincere. As he spoke, Liu laughed mockingly. Perhaps the masters of Kyankan Group do have a conscience attack and want to make up for the debt they owed to the wasteland for so many years. But I can't gamble. People in the wasteland don't have the capital to gamble on optimistic possibilities, so be prepared. War may be coming. Just as Liu was furious about Sin's disappearance, the GD apprentice who was involved was hiding in the dark, sorting out the memories in his mind and carefully combing through his recent experiences. No matter how urgent the situation is, you must remain calm and rational. This is the teaching from the master, and Sin has been practicing it for many years. After watching the TV news in the omnivore tavern, his brain became blank for a while, and the strong emotional impulse swept his reason like a raging tide. He could hardly remember how he left the bar, and only vaguely remembered that when he left, the people in the tavern seemed to be in a state of fear. However, Sin quickly regained his composure and tried his best to avoid the eyes and ears of Bayan, and successfully left the wasteland. Now, he was taking a cargo ship, sneaking to Ziyajing, where the news program was held, to seek a meeting with his master. In the cargo box that could barely accommodate him, Sin whispered to himself, "I hope everything goes well. Master, I'm here to see you." Thinking of his master, Sin's mood, which had just calmed down, was once again filled with waves of worry. Although Mostima in the news footage looked as calm and elegant as before they parted, Sin knew that his master's condition was not optimistic, because she actually gave false testimony for the Kyankan Group in the news program. Was Nanhel's death instigated by the Republic? Was he assassinated in order to break the protection of the local economic order of the Kyan Galaxy by Nanming capital? The news release read by the host was clearly a distortion of right and wrong, and a shameless framing of the Republic. Only ignorant people who have been brainwashed by the Kyankan Group's propaganda machine for a long time would believe such nonsense. But the appearance of the GD Master made these framing words extremely convincing. Sin certainly didn't believe that his master would turn against the Republic. In fact, when he saw the news program, he realized that the program was a pure scam. Although the Kyankan Group openly pushed the GD Master to the front of the stage on the news screen, the host never connected with Mostima to talk to her throughout the news program. He just used the screen to show the GD Master's smile and then read the news release by himself. This is actually a common misleading method, making the audience mistakenly believe that the GD Master is endorsing the news release, but in fact Mostima may not have heard of that set of rhetoric. However, the Kyankan Group dared to push Mostima to the front of the stage, which in itself is an extremely important signal. If the previous ambush against the GD Master and Apprentice was just a conspiracy, then now the Kyankan Group seems to be turning the conspiracy into an open conspiracy. Next, whether it is Nanhel's death or the friction between the Kyankan Group and the Republic, I'm afraid that they will surface, so Sin really can't wait. When he thought of his own departure without saying goodbye, Sin felt sad again. The teammates must be going crazy. Zhuang Yuanying fell down, and Sin walked away right after him. As for Liu's reaction, it was even more unimaginable. He was still carrying a million debts, and he just disappeared. If they met again, he might directly use the main gun of the silver ship to bombard him. However, no matter what reason Sin used, he could not convince himself that he should continue to live a peaceful and comfortable life as an excellent student under the protection of the Red Apricot team during this turbulent time. From the most utilitarian point of view, the biggest reason why a GD apprentice would live in a civilian organization that was obviously not on the right path was that he needed to rely on their power to investigate the truth. But now that the truth has been pushed out of the water, what else can be investigated? In the news footage, Master Mostima was clearly sitting in the top floor conference room of the most prestigious Luodu hotel in Ziyajing City. The unique scenery that could be seen when looking out of that conference room was clearly recorded by many versions of tour guide materials, and Sin would never admit his mistake. Even the location can be determined. After that, all they need to do is find a spaceship and fly all the way to Ziyajing. The Silver Knights have basically lost their value to Sin. Of course, this utilitarian way of thinking is not what Sin intended. What really drove him to leave regardless of everything was the last sentence of the news program when he left the Omnivore Tavern. A sentence that chilled him to death. During this period, the GD Master received great assistance from the Silver Knights. Chapter 105. Walking into a trap. This sentence in the news program was obviously written by an expert, and it contains too much meaning. First, this may be a hint that the Silver Knights also had a hand in this false news. It just so happened that Liu was also in Ziying during that time, and he was indeed somewhat inseparable, and Xin never trusted the other party unconditionally. Second, this may be a hint that the Kyankan group is already very clear that the remnant of the GD Master and apprentice is now under the protection of the Silver. If Xin is unwilling to jump out himself, then the ruler of this galaxy will crush Xin's protective shell with an unstoppable ferocious momentum. No matter which possibility it is, Xin can no longer stay in the wasteland, and even can't say goodbye to Enping and others. What can I say when I meet and say goodbye? If they keep me, I will stay. If they don't keep me, how different is it from just leaving? Who cares about the mere issue of etiquette? Of course, Xin knew deep down that all this was just an excuse. He just didn't want to meet and say goodbye to those teammates. So, even if it's just running away from the debt, I'll pay it back slowly when I have the chance. Thinking this through, Xin let out a sigh of relief and felt a little more relaxed. But just when he was halfway relaxed, his breath suddenly tightened because of the approaching footsteps. Who is approaching at this time? Xin secretly boarded this cargo ship to Ziying. Once he was discovered, it would be troublesome to end it. But along with the footsteps came a noise. Damn it, what the hell is wrong with the old man? He forbids smoking and drinking, making it seem like we are on a regular spaceship. Yeah, the old man himself is a smoker and a drunkard, and he actually made such rules on the ship. Doesn't he think it's ridiculous? I don't care whether it's ridiculous or not, but I really can't live without a cigarette for most of the day. Later, Xiaomeng, you can help us spread the word. We smoke 2 cigarettes in the cargo hold, and then it's your turn. Okay, but don't delay too long. Leodu and his team have been ruthless in their patrols recently. Xiao-sun and his team were just whipped this morning. Damn, that bastard Leodu, it makes me angry just thinking about it. There's no way. Who made the old man suddenly go crazy and promote Leodu to be an inspector? I just can't understand it. They are brothers who live together day and night. It's not a precious cargo ship. Is it necessary to be so strict? It is said that the old man was a captain in B freight when he was young. He offended his superiors and ended up doing freight smuggling. Maybe he has started to feel nostalgic recently. Several crew members cursed and said irrelevant words and walked into the cargo hold where Xin was hiding, but Xin was relieved to hear this. It turned out that only a few crew members who were addicted to smoking came here secretly, and they would leave naturally after they finished smoking. There was no risk. Although Xin thought so, he still curled up a little tighter in the box and slowed down his breathing to almost disappear so as to minimize the risk of being discovered. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. Just when Xin thought that some of them would come over directly, he suddenly heard the lookout named Xiaomeng exclaimed, "Hey, what are you doing? Don't go so deep inside." Several crew members were puzzled. If you don't go inside, won't people see you if you stand at the door? Xiaomeng hurriedly explained. Okay, stop first. Don't go. Have you forgotten what the old man told you before? The biggest rule for this trip to Ziying is that the box closest to the inside of the cargo hold must not be touched under any circumstances. The old man nags every day. Who remembers what he said? What's wrong with the innermost box? Why can't it be touched? As he spoke, the crew member seemed to become interested. Xiaomeng said anxiously, "Old Wang, don't do stupid things." The old man was not joking when he spoke. His right hand was always on the gun. You are all old people on this ship. You should know what it means when the old man touches the gun, right? After saying this, the cargo hold suddenly became cold. The bravest old Wang took back his steps embarrassedly. I was dozing off because of the old man's nagging. Who has the patience to see where his hand is? Okay, I've lost interest because of you talking. I won't smoke this cigarette anymore. Old Wang took the lead, and the other few people also seemed to be bored and left one after another. A crisis was resolved invisibly. However, Xin, who was hiding in the box, felt a chill, and all the muscles in his body were tensed in an instant. The conversation just now sounded ordinary at first. It was just a story about an old captain who suddenly began to strictly enforce navigation discipline. Not allowing crew members to touch cargo boxes was just a common thing in cargo transportation. But in Scene's ears, he almost clearly heard the word trap. The cargo box he was hiding in contained some generic drugs produced in the deserted area that infringed intellectual property rights. They were not that valuable, at least not as valuable as the smuggled weapons in the box next to him. Why did the old captain warn him about the box he was hiding in? He clearly knew that someone was hiding in the box. No, when he boarded the ship, the box was inexplicably open, clearly inviting him into a trap. After realizing this, the word trap naturally emerged in Scene's mind, and at the same time, many ignored clues were instantly connected. Yeah, I was saying it. How could I escape from the wasteland so easily? I'm also wondering why neither Anping nor Liu were prepared for my escape. They don't seem to be that naive. As for this cargo ship, it's even more unreasonable. Just when I was worrying about how to leave the wasteland, it opened the door of the cargo hold at the port to welcome me. Now that I think about it, maybe that news program is not a coincidence. The Omnivore Tavern is the lowest level of the poor paradise. When will anyone be interested in official news? That TV should not even receive news broadcasts under normal circumstances. Even, they should have seized the opportunity when Liu was not at home to design and present the whole show, and I was impulsive and ignored so many flaws and ran into the trap. Thinking of this, Scene's heart surged again, but he quickly suppressed all these emotions. At this time, being in a dilemma is an objective fact, and no amount of negative emotions can help. What he needs to do is to use his own rationality to find a way out. It was difficult to break the situation, because Scene had already left Zun in the box with the spaceship. When people are in space, many things are beyond their control. Moreover, the other party could carefully design such a trap with many links interlocking, so how could they leave a flaw in the spaceship and let him escape easily? But now Scene had no choice. Chapter 106 In the Dark. The Jedi apprentice took a deep breath, unfastened the lock of the box without any hesitation, pushed open the lid and jumped out. Just as he landed, a sudden applause rang out from a corner of the warehouse, which made Scene shudder. You woke up pretty quickly. I thought you were going to sleep happily all the way to your destination. Unfortunately, sometimes, being too smart is not necessarily a good thing. If you could be a little more confused, you could actually suffer less. Following the direction of the voice, Scene quickly locked his eyes on the corner of the room, and then saw a vague figure. The man was about 1.7 meters tall, thin, wearing a tight short shirt, and his exposed arms and legs showed extremely explosive and flexible muscle lines. However, when he hid in the shadows, he almost blended into the environment. If he hadn't taken the initiative to applaud and speak, Scene would hardly have found him. This is an extremely rare situation for the Jedi apprentice who has always been sensitive. For such an opponent who is so proficient in hiding, Scene cannot completely trust his eyes and ears. Fortunately, he can rely on more than just his eyes and ears. Through the flow of the Force, Scene grasped the truth hidden under the disguise. He could clearly feel that the person hiding in the corner had an extremely strong life energy and an equally strong darkness in his body. It seemed that the darkness could be transformed into substance and flow out. This perception made the hair on Scene's back stand up. Don't be so nervous. The person in the corner chuckled. I don't plan to kill you for the time being. The requirement above is to bring you alive, and if it is not necessary, don't bring even the wounded. After all, you are an extremely precious commodity. So if you are willing to lie back honestly and pretend that nothing happened, it would be great. Scene ignored what the other party said. In the case of being unable to determine the authenticity, any information provided by the other party will only interfere with people's minds. What he has to do now is to control the situation as soon as possible and never let the spaceship really take him to the destination. After all, on the spaceship, the most he would have to face is one ship of enemies. If he reaches the destination, he might have to face a whole port of enemies. Ignoring me? Are you introverted? I don't dislike introverted children. It's one of the few pleasures I have in my daily life to tease introverts. So, do you know where this spaceship is going? It's not Zurging. There are too many troubles there, so the real destination is the space city Lee. You should have been there once before. It's a beautiful place, right? You will get a temporary home there, and your food, clothing, housing and transportation will be based on the standards of senior cadres of the group. That's what many people have worked hard all their lives and only dream of. By the way, you can occasionally use holographic equipment to chat and reminisce with your beloved master. Of course, you can't actually meet him, because according to the think tank above, the GD Master has incredible and terrifying mobility. If you and your disciple are placed on the same planet, maybe she can directly tear through space to meet you and then escape. Honestly, are GD Masters that powerful? Although there are many legends about you, I really don't feel that there is anything great about you. She looks like an ordinary woman, not as powerful as me. If I meet her on the battlefield, I'm quite sure that I can. Hearing this, Scene finally couldn't help but say, you will be destroyed by the master in an instant. However, before he finished speaking, Scene felt a strong sense of crisis. The strict training he had undergone as a GD apprentice allowed him to react in time. Scene turned his body to the side without thinking, and avoided a powerful direct attack aimed at his waist. However, when Scene tried to fight back, he found that the man had once again perfectly hidden himself in the darkness of the cargo hold. Only the still frivolous voice came from all directions. You react pretty fast. Is this the basic skill of a GD apprentice? I really want to see how you train normally. But then again, as a GD apprentice, you get so angry when someone says a few words to you. You don't seem to be very good at keeping calm. If you go to the battlefield like this, you will easily die. So listen to me, just go back to the box and lie down. Forced resistance will not end well. Scene still ignored it. The opponent's strength is indeed very strong, but not so strong that he cannot deal with it. Under the protection of the Force, Scene has enough confidence to defeat the opponent. The only question is, how many enemies are there? As if he had seen through Scene's thoughts, the hidden assassin said, let me tell you a piece of good news. I'm the only real combatant on this ship. After all, the main forces are now engaging to guard against your intimidating master. So if you really have the ability to defeat me, you can directly hijack this spaceship. At that time, you can go to Zurging to reunite with your master and apprentice, or run back to Coruscant crying. It's up to you. Scene remained unmoved, just continuing to feel the changes in the environment, trying to use it to judge the opponent's position and movements. But deep in his heart, Scene believed the opponent's words. Such a powerful combatant would not appear casually, and if the opponent really had more than one person, the sneak attack just now should have been a joint attack by multiple people, who joined forces to capture Scene directly, throw him into a box and lock him up all the way to the space city. The opponent obviously couldn't do it, so he repeatedly used these trash words to disturb Scene's mind, and induce him to reveal his flaws. In other words, if he could really defeat this man, maybe. Just as Scene was thinking of this, the assassin in the dark took action again. An energy beam that was extremely conspicuous in the darkness aimed at Scene's arm and shot out. Almost at the same time, Scene raised his hand, as if he had foreseen the future to avoid the opponent's sneak attack. At the same time, a blaster on his waist suddenly fired, shooting the energy beam into the darkness deep in the warehouse. The assassin's exaggerated sigh came from the darkness. Oh, that was a close call. I didn't expect you to have a rapid fire skill. Is this also the basic skill of a GD apprentice? Aren't you a standard melee unit? The legend is wrong. Or did you learn this from the silver people? Let me think. It can't be Lunan. Back then in the entire security bureau, her rapid fire skill was well known, and many people guessed that she might take over the captain's job. It's a pity that she later became a traitor because of a trivial matter. It's really a pity. Chapter 107. Old tricks again. The enemy's words made Scene's ears move slightly. Although he had decided to ignore all the words of the other party before, there was no doubt that the other party was a master of words and could always accurately arouse Scene's emotions. However, just when Scene finally became interested in the enemy's words, the man stopped the topic. Oh, what a pity. Since you are so omnipotent, it seems a little dangerous for me to continue to confront you, so I won't play with you. Scene couldn't help but frowned. What did he mean by this? Not playing with you, is it surrendering? Not likely, right? Or is the other party up to some conspiracy? Unconsciously, Scene's mind has been gradually drawn to the other party, and he can no longer completely ignore every word the other party said, like he did at the beginning. Since I can't beat you fair and square, I have to use some extraordinary means. Well, you just heard that there are many crew members on this ship. Most of them know nothing about this voyage, let alone that there are dangerous people like you and me on board. The only person on the whole ship who knows about it is the captain, and he actually only knows that this ship is going to Lee instead of Kun. So in short, all the people on this ship are innocent. Hearing this, Scene's heart sank. Sure enough, the assassin said next. So, if you don't want to lie back in the box obediently, I will have to brutally kill these innocent people one by one. You see, an obvious villain like me must be particularly cruel when killing people. As a positive character, you definitely don't want to see innocent people die tragically, right? Scene's anger became more and more difficult to contain, especially the other party's relaxed and cheerful tone, which added fuel to the fire. It seemed that the assassin was not talking about killing, but discussing cooking. Living lives were not even as important as numbers to him. God knows how much blood and lives this kind of person has on his hands. Hey, are you angry? You reacted so exaggeratedly. Is this the first time you've seen a perverted killer? I'm so sorry. Do you want me to give you a souvenir? For example. As he spoke, something round and flashing red light suddenly appeared in the darkness, causing Scene's pupils to shrink. Thermal grenade? Exclamation mark. He dared to throw a thermal grenade in the cargo hold of a flying spaceship? Question mark. However, it was this moment of surprise that Scene finally lost the initiative to confront him. The other party took advantage of the moment when Scene's attention was diverted and pounced on him again. Two sharp blades flashing with cold light pierced Scene's heart and throat at a speed as fast as thunder and lightning. The Jedi apprentice once again demonstrated his amazing physical quality. He twisted his body to avoid the sharp edge at the critical moment, leaving only shallow scratches on his body. However, before the pain could reach his brain, Scene realized something was wrong. Although the opponent's attack was fast, it was just a feint. Just as Scene twisted his body to avoid it, the thin assassin easily passed Scene and rushed all the way to the cargo hold door, leaning against the door frame and waving his hand at Scene. Oh, now, you let a perverted killer out of the cargo hold and let him do whatever he wants. Through the light of the corridor outside the cargo hold, Scene finally saw the man's face clearly. It was a flat face with almost no facial features, slender eyes, light eyebrows, and thin lips that were tightly pursed. Scene felt as if he was looking at a severely worn mask. However, when the man raised the corners of his mouth and squinted his eyes, the flat face suddenly showed chilling malice. From now on, I will kill one person every 3 minutes, starting with the elderly and women. By the way, you may not know this, but the captain brought his wife and daughter on board this voyage. It's a very warm family. When Scene heard this, he could hardly suppress his anger. If it weren't for the strict training that every Jedi would undergo to control his emotions, Scene suspected that he would lose his mind in anger in an instant. However, facing such a brutal opponent, Scene couldn't help but growl, tensed all his muscles, and prepared to fight to the death with him. Hey, you don't care about the thermal grenade at your feet? Are you so unrestrained? The assassin's words finally turned Scene's attention back to the round, shiny object. Only then did he remember that the first bait thrown by the assassin was the thermal grenade. The remaining anger in Scene's heart was instantly extinguished by the sense of crisis at the critical moment of life and death. He dodged to the side at an astonishing speed and hid himself behind the storage box where he had just hidden, hoping that the heavy box could help him block the direct impact of the thermal grenade. However, the next moment, the expected loud explosion did not sound, but was replaced by a burst of funny festive music. Ding ding dong, ding ding dong. A popular song that the Hutts often use to celebrate winter festivals came from the thermal bomb. The assassin's laughter sounded outside the door. Ha ha ha, it's really rare to find a child as honest as you. You do whatever you are told to do. Are all Jedi apprentices so cute? No, I'm almost laughing to death. Fortunately, I have recorded the segment just now. I must share it with my friends when I go back. Oh, By the way, I don't seem to have any friends. Ha ha ha. The assassin's laughter gradually faded away, and Scene squatted behind the cargo box, and had accidentally pinched fingerprints on the wall of the box. However, he was not in a hurry to chase him out. Instead, he took a deep breath, then loosened his fingers, and let the force guide him to calm himself down. Because at any time, the key to defeating the enemy is not impulsiveness and recklessness. He had just been provoked by the assassin in various ways, so that his anger affected his reason, and he was successfully teased by a toy thermal grenade, which was simply a shame for the Jedi Order. What's more, it is suicidal to deal with an assassin with such amazing strength when you lose your reason. Hey, you won't chase me out? Then I'm really going to kill someone. Hey, don't you think I'm just threatening you with false words? Is there such a lack of trust between people? Don't I look like a perverted murderer? Upon hearing this, Scene exhaled the air in his lungs, then stood up and said loudly, if you dare to hurt a life, I will die here. I won't let you take me away alive. In the corridor, the erratic voice stopped abruptly. Obviously, the assassin didn't expect Scene to have this trick. Scene said, you said that your mission is to bring me to the space city alive, so as to threaten my master. So what if I die here? How sure are you that you can control a reckless GD master? Once she returns to Coruscant, how can the mere Kyankan group face the wrath of the Republic? Before he finished speaking, the applause of the assassins came from the cargo hold door. It's amazing, using yourself as a hostage to threaten the enemy. You are worthy of being your master's disciple. The unique skills are exactly the same. Unfortunately, I'm not that idiot Zayan. This trick is useless to me. Because I'm not the director of the Security Bureau. What does the life and death of Kyankan Security or even Kyankan Group have to do with me? I'm just a temporary worker who gets paid to do things. If it fails, half of the deposit will be refunded. If you want to commit suicide, I'm also welcome to do it, which just saves me the effort in the second half of the journey. It's easy to get half of the deposit, why not? Chapter 108, Offer Plate Tricks. Scene was startled by the other party's reply. The assassin then said, but if you die, this spaceship will be useless. As a perverted killer, it is reasonable for me to kill everyone on the ship to relieve my boredom, right? I really have to thank the old captain for his thoughtfulness. Knowing that I was coming, he brought all his men and even his family on board. As a perverted killer, there is nothing more joyful than this. Scene's breathing rhythm was disrupted again. Although he had repeatedly experienced the opponent's despicable and shameless behavior, and repeatedly reminded himself to stay calm no matter what, but Scene had to admit that the assassin was really good at playing with people's hearts, especially good at provoking people's anger. Every time his laughter sounded, Scene felt his heartbeat rhythm become unstable, and the opponent once again hit his vital point. Scene simply couldn't sit back and watch the other party kill innocent people, even if the people on the ship might not be so innocent. Although the assassin who claimed to be a perverted killer had not killed any innocent crew members so far, Scene would never bet on whether the other party was just playing tricks. So, you, the apprentice who has run out of tricks, it's not too late to lie back in the box now. The treatment promised to you before is still valid. In the space city, Lee, you will live in the senior cadre's room and enjoy absolutely generous treatment. And when all things are settled, the group will send your master and apprentice back to Coruscant. As for the death of Nanheli, it will never hinder the status of the Kyankan group in the Republic, and the order and peace of the Kyan Galaxy will last forever. Hey, are you listening? Scene was of course listening. Unlike his previous attitude of completely ignoring it, he now paid special attention to the opponent's trash talk, because he found that blindly ignoring it had no effect. The assassin was good at provoking the opponent's mood as he claimed, and pretending to be calm was just what he wanted. Moreover, this evasive ignoring actually made Scene miss the opportunity to get to know his opponent better. So after thinking for a moment, he tried to strike up a conversation. How high level is the so-called senior cadre room? Hahaha, of course it is high level enough. There are at least 18 senior security soldiers monitoring outside the door around the clock, and 2 team leader level elites accompany the room day and night. At least one captain will lead a team to be stationed in the Shiangsuan district where you are. Do you think it is high level? Scene silently memorized the name of the Chiangsaen district and began to recall the information in his mind. Chiangsaen district is a confidential area of Li. Its core Chiangsaen Jade building is well known. The headquarters of many giant companies are stationed in it. Its status is even as important as Buzhou. Such a confidential place will naturally be heavily guarded, especially since it was breached by the Red Apricot team not long ago. The security of Chiangsaen district is probably the best among all the districts in Li. From this perspective, it is appropriate to put Scene under house arrest in Chiangsaen district. Fourth scene. This result was not too bad. After all, he had just dealt with the person in charge, Mr. Zhang. He was a cunning man, but he had a history with Anping and others, so he might be able to make use of him. For a moment, the GD apprentice had many thoughts in his mind, but the next moment he swept all his thoughts away. In the final analysis, not a single word of what the other party said was true or credible, so there was no point in considering how to deal with Mr. Zhang here. What he needed was not the information provided by the other party, but the conversation itself. So he asked again, why don't you come to guard it in person? Can't Chiangsaen security afford the wages? Hahaha, it seems that you still remember what I said about temporary workers. It's really rare. That's right, I have to get an extra bounty for every mission, and the security bureau can't afford to pay me for guarding a nobody like you every day. Scene's heart moved. So your status is actually far above the captain, and this time you didn't come here just for me. You had another mission in the deserted area, and then you met me by chance. So what did you do in the deserted area? Did you dare to come here specifically when Li Yu was not around? The assassin laughed even more happily. Are you playing a reasoning game? Are you trying to delay time by talking so much nonsense? I don't care. Every minute and every second you delay, the spaceship is heading towards the beautiful space city. And the free and perverted killer, just me, also. The assassin's laughter finally stopped because he suddenly heard a heart-pounding buzzing sound, followed by the sharp sound of metal being pierced, melted, and flames bursting out. The assassin immediately realized what Scene, who was hiding in the cargo hold, was doing. He was using the GD weapon. Boy, you are really smarter than I expected. Scene replied casually, thank you. As he spoke, Scene slowly moved his arm, dragging the lightsaber that was immersed in the floor to the side a little bit, and the melting track under his feet became longer. The reason why Scene wanted to have a boring war of words with the assassin was indeed to delay time, to cut the cargo hold floor for him, and touch the pipeline area below to delay enough time. According to Scene's understanding of this giant camel cargo ship, there is a channel under its cargo hold that accommodates multiple energy pipelines, which can be called the key point of the spacecraft. Once it is damaged, the energy supply of the entire spacecraft will be paralyzed by half. It should be said that this is an improper design made by this type of cargo ship in order to save space and beautify the appearance. Concentrating too many pipelines in one place will naturally pose a safety hazard. Fortunately, the designer designed a sufficiently thick metal wall for the pipeline channel, which made the giant head camel a favorite of many civilian freighters. But now, the thick metal wall quickly melted and disintegrated under the cutting of the lightsaber blade, and the pipelines protected by it also broke one after another after a crackling sound. Naturally, a shrill alarm suddenly rang in the entire cargo ship. Scene listened to the ringing in his ears and looked at the dazzling red warning lights flashing around him. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It seems that he has always experienced this kind of thing recently, on the Silver, the underground base of the Red Apricot team, and this cargo ship. The shrill alarm sound seems to have become his own background music. However, he had no choice. Destroying the power supply pipeline of the spacecraft was the only way he thought of to turn the tables. After regaining his calm and calculating carefully, the young GD apprentice knew very well that he had no way to defeat his opponent in this environment. Although he was superior to the assassin in both fighting and shooting skills, the other party did not give him a fair chance to compete, so the advantage in strength was meaningless. However, the opponent's endless despicable tricks also gave Scene great inspiration. If you can ignore the gap in strength and do whatever you want, as long as you catch the opponent's weak spot, then why should I wait foolishly for others to catch my weak spot instead of catching it back? Scene threatened the other party with suicide, trying to use this principle. It's a pity that this assassin is even crazier than the former security director Ziyan, and doesn't care about Scene's life or death, which makes Scene's threat ineffective. Therefore, Scene can only grasp one weak spot, the assassin's own life. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109, The Price of Innocence. As the alarms in the cargo ship became more and more shrill, the navigation status of the spacecraft quickly became unstable, and the hull swayed from side to side for a while, like an earthquake. Scene stood firmly in place, as if there were magnets on the floor under his feet. At the same time, he also clearly felt that the assassin was standing outside the cargo hold door, also motionless. But Scene knew that he had finally taken the initiative at this time. The assassin outside the door could no longer laugh freely. Amid the alarm, Scene said calmly, although the giant head camel model is cheap and easy to repair, it is very difficult to repair it when it encounters such serious damage, especially when the pipeline is broken. All parts of the ship will be affected. The entire ship must be mobilized and repaired with all efforts to keep the spacecraft sailing. Outside the cargo hold, the assassin said nothing. At this time, panicked crew members had already rushed to the scene. When they approached the door, they were startled. Sunzi, why are you here? Scene's heart moved. It seemed that the ugly assassin boarded the ship openly. That's right, since the captain was under his control, it would be easy to arrange a fake identity for him. Unfortunately, Scene did not have this treatment. He boarded the ship secretly. Except for the captain and the assassin named Sunzi, no one knew him. If he was exposed at this time. Wait, you, who are you? As he spoke, the crew member who was walking the fastest, carrying a repair toolbox, passed Sunzi and walked into the cargo hold. He saw Scene standing next to the hole and was stunned for a moment. Scene smiled and said, he's just a stowaway, not worth mentioning. You should get down to business as soon as possible. If the leak in the pipeline is not repaired, the engine may suffer permanent damage. Even if we are lucky, we can only float in the universe like space junk, waiting for the rescue ship that may arrive at any time. If we are unlucky. Before Scene finished speaking, the crew member was already running over with a box in his hand. For the crew of this cargo ship, it is more important to repair the cargo ship than a stowaway. Although the pipeline damage is not a life-threatening problem, it can be fatal if it is not handled properly. Scene glanced at the man and saw that he was dressed as a mechanic and the tools and facilities in the box were relatively complete, so he was relieved. Giant Camel, as a common civilian cargo ship, it is not difficult to repair faults. Even if the core pipeline is damaged, an experienced mechanic can quickly handle it. After all, Scene didn't really want to destroy the ship and kill people. He just wanted to use a crisis to tie up the assassin's hands and feet. In the face of the crisis, everyone on the ship had to be busy repairing the fault. If the assassin dared to make trouble at this time, he would be buried with everyone else with his own life. Scene speculated that the assassin did not have this kind of self-sacrifice. And sure enough, as the crew members who came to repair the ship continued to enter the cargo hold, the assassin never moved. He just stood in front of the door and greeted the passing crew members from time to time. He had a very authentic Ziyang accent, and his words when he spoke could always dispel other people's suspicions just right. So it was obviously extremely incongruous for him to stand in front of the cargo hold door, but passers-by seemed to be used to it. This made Scene in the cargo hold look even more abrupt. Scene himself didn't care. Since he had caused this riot, he didn't expect it to end well. In fact, he jumped into this trap and couldn't end well. What he had to do now was to tie up the hands and feet of the perverted murderer as much as possible, and then wait for an opportunity to subdue him. As long as he could control the assassin, Scene was confident that he could convince the others on the ship to drive the spaceship back to the wasteland. Of course, it could only be back to the wasteland. Now, whether it was the space city, Lee, or the capital, Kun, it was a dead end for Scene. Only the wasteland, or in other words, only Liu's Silver Knights and the Red Apricot Squad could be a safe shelter. Thinking of this, Scene wanted to laugh out loud, laugh at his own absurdity and stupidity. After watching the TV show, he fled desperately, but he fell into a trap before he even left the wasteland. If he hadn't been lucky enough to hear the words of those crew members who were smoking secretly, he would have flown to the space city in ignorance and become a prisoner. Although he has done his best to control the situation, the only way to survive is to return to the wasteland. When Scene thought about the possible reactions of Liu and others when they saw him return in disgrace, he wanted to laugh more and more. What other reactions could he have besides laughing? At most, he could capture this elite assassin whose rank was far above that of the captain and give it to Liu and others as a trophy to see if he could atone for his sins. No, atonement alone was not enough. He had to find a way to get Liu and others to send him to Zurging. In the final analysis, Scene still wanted to see his master. After a long separation, the young apprentice found it increasingly difficult to suppress his longing. However, just as Scene had this idea, he felt a numbness in his waist, and then a strong shock instantly spread from his waist to his whole body. Subconsciously lowering his head, Scene only saw that the mechanic who was supposed to be busy repairing the machine was holding a high voltage electric shotgun tightly, pouring all the arc from the muzzle into Scene's body. And the honest crew member's face was clearly blooming with a grim smile. At this moment, all the thoughts in Scene's mind were shattered by the strong impact. He couldn't even maintain rational thinking. He just watched everything happen without any reaction. Just as Scene's consciousness gradually became hazy, the voice of Sunzi came from outside the door again. "What are you guys doing? So soft. Are you serving your wife? 2 more high voltage electric shocks. Just treat that kid as a disobedient bouncer." As soon as the voice fell, 2 stronger electric shocks hit the chest and back one after another. It was 2 more mechanics who rushed over with electric shotguns, as if they were trying to steal the credit. After being hit by 3 high voltage electric shotguns in a row, Scene couldn't hold on, no matter how strong he was. But before he fainted, he heard the voice of Sunzi again. "You are so cute, kid. Knowing that this spaceship is a trap set in advance, how can you naively think that there is anyone on this ship who is absolutely innocent?" Chapter 110 Brothers. The assassin, who went by the alias Sunzi, lost interest after instructing the crew to electrocute Scene. His flat face withdrew all his expressions, like a stone puppet, revealing a chilling gloom. He waved his hand, signaling the crew to throw Scene back into the cargo box. Several crew members who looked like mechanics immediately did as they were told, and then sealed the cargo hold with welding rods, leaving only a few breathing holes. After dealing with Scene, several people quickly spread out the toolbox and started working on the holes cut by the lightsaber. Although the panic of these crew members just now was half fake, the trouble caused by Scene was really real. If the damage cannot be repaired as soon as possible, the spacecraft will be in big trouble. Sunzi squinted his slender eyes and stared at the sealed cargo box. His slender hands with protruding joints trembled slightly, as if he was hungry and thirsty. "I always feel that I'm not satisfied with winning the game just like this." The next moment, he glanced at the busy crew members, and gradually his fierce eyes flashed. At this moment, the sound of the communicator came from his pocket. Sunzi immediately frowned, feeling disappointed. But as the sound of the communicator became more and more urgent, he finally walked out of the cargo hold and came to a secluded place to connect the conversation. A slightly dull voice came from the communicator immediately. "Zazi, how are you doing?" The assassin, whose alias is Sunzi, and whose real name is Zazi, responded in a lazy tone. "Thanks to the director, all work is progressing steadily. During the mission, I always keep in mind the security discipline and combat requirements." "Don't talk nonsense like that." Zazi's thin lips curled up into a smile. "Then what do you want me to say?" "Brother, long time no see. You, Zazi, I know you have always been dissatisfied with the family's arrangements, and I admit that many decisions of the previous generation were indeed inappropriate, but there is no need for you to be upset about the past, right?" Zazi interrupted the other party with a smile. "Brother, you have liked to take advantage of others since you were 3 years old, and you still can't change this problem. You are the director of security, only one step away from the position of the group's board of directors, but your own brother is just a frontline agent, risking his life on the front line all day long. Now you tell me not to be upset? Listen to yourself. Is this human language? Although Zazi found a secluded cabin when he spoke, his voice was loud enough for the crew in the corridor to hear. But half of the crew were busy repairing the ship, and the other half did not dare to ask about the privacy of Sunzi, and had to leave in a hurry. On the other hand, Yan, the director of the General Administration of Kyankan Security, was really amused. Zazi, I have been asking you to be my deputy since 10 years ago. If necessary, I can even give you the position of director. The people of the previous generation have passed away one after another, and I can still do this. But you keep refusing, and insist on being a frontline agent, and you only choose the most dangerous tasks to do. I have warned you many times that the deserted area of Zun is full of dangers, and you will die without a complete body if you are not careful. Before you, the Security Bureau lost more than 10 agents in the deserted area in a year, and you. Zazi said, but I succeeded in one day. I have found the person who those idiots with scales on their brains couldn't find no matter what. By the way, I also brought back a big prize. The Jedi apprentice you have been dreaming of is now in my hands. Yan was immediately moved. Really? Zazi said, of course I was lying to you. The person ran away a long time ago. After that, Zazi cut off the communication, twisted his facial features, and laughed out loud, as if this kind of teasing of his brother could make him feel sincerely happy. A moment later, Yan, who was furious, sent another communication. What's going on? Tell me clearly. However, the security chief found the captain of the giant camel-shaped cargo ship to verify the news, and then realized that Zazi was lying to him again. Zazi, whose lie was exposed, did not show any guilt. Instead, he sighed and said, did the old captain betray me? It seems that he completely lacks respect for people. It is necessary to teach him a lesson. As soon as these words came out, even his brother Yan felt his skin tightened. What do you want to do? Zazi said, I want to remind him that his family is on the ship. Shut up. Yan couldn't help but said angrily, the captain is a subordinate of the Zum branch. Subordinates of the branch, can't we kill them? Zazi asked lightly, brother, when you ambushed the GD master and apprentice in Ziyajing, you took everyone in the bar hostage and threatened to blow them all up. There were quite a few subordinates of the branch in the bar at that time, right? Yan just had a headache when he heard it. How can they be the same? It's indeed different, because you don't have the courage to kill anyone. Zazi raised the corners of his mouth, and his flat features showed a weird smile. So you were seen through by that woman, so she dared to threaten me with such a ridiculous method as suicide, and then successfully turned the tables. Brother, I told you at the time that appearing with the red dot of a sniper rifle will not make you look brave and formidable, but will expose you as a civilian bureaucrat with nothing in sight. Yan was a little exasperated, but I still successfully put them under house arrest. Haha, brother, why are you so naive? You successfully put them under house arrest? It was obviously that woman who was successfully put under house arrest by you. She eats and sleeps well in the manor, and can use the staff around her to dig out the truth she wants step by step. Brother, calculate it yourself. How many batches of people around her have you replaced during this period? How many available people do you have? You hurriedly pushed her onto the news program this time. Do you really think the time is ripe, or have you been forced to no end by her? Enough. Being angry will only make you look more pitiful. After all, the reason why that woman is so unscrupulous is because she is sure that you are a coward who dares not to kill anyone. Yan was so angry that his eyes turned black. You are talking so eloquently. Can I give you my position as director? Of course not. If I sit in your position, human lives are just numbers, but how can mere numbers have weight? That's why that desperate woman is not afraid of you. But I'm different. The lives on my hands are real. Yan said sarcastically, real. How many people have you killed personally so far? It's not a matter of numbers, brother. Zazi said softly, a real murderer does not need to use numbers to show his terror. I don't kill many people, but if I say I want to kill someone, no one dares to turn a deaf ear. The conversation between the brothers was only halfway through when suddenly a series of explosions rang out in the cargo ship. The hull was shaken, and there were cries of many crew members. In the chaos, Xiaozi's body was still as stable as a magnet in the cabin, but the sound of the change outside the cabin made him frown. He interrupted the call with Xiaoyan without hesitation, walked out of the cabin, and grabbed a passing crew member. "What's going on?" The crew member was a little confused, rolling and crawling in the corridor, tears streaming down his face, but when Xiaozi grabbed the collar and lifted him up in the air, he had to face that flat face, and it was instantly like being poured with ice water, and his whole heart froze. "Yes, there is a problem with the engine. Sister Tang said she can't fix it." Xiaozi was a little surprised. "Why did the engine fail?" "There is a problem with the energy pipeline, and the engine's cooling device stopped first, so." Xiaozi felt a little impatient. He didn't know much about this kind of mechanical repair skills. The crew member's detailed description was a bit confusing, but at least he could grasp the key point. It really can't be repaired. What will happen if it can't be repaired? The crew member looked bitter. Sister Tang has tried her best, but the engine is too bad, and she is not a professional technician from those famous factories. "I'm afraid." At this point, the crew member trembled all over again, but he thought that if the engine really couldn't be repaired, the result would be much worse than drifting alone in space. Once the engine lacks cooling and is overloaded, it may cause an explosion. Xiaozi didn't hesitate to hear this. "Where is the escape capsule?" No. The crew member almost cried when he spoke. "Our giant camel is not equipped with an escape capsule in order to add cargo space." Xiaozi then let go of his hand. "So, we are all dead." After hearing this, the crew member fell to the ground on the spot, and then he actually cried out, but just as the cry sounded, he was kicked by Xiaozi and stopped breathing. "Shut up." The cold-faced assassin's expression was even colder at this time, and his whole face was as smooth as if it had been cut by a knife. He walked slowly through the noisy corridor and came to the first cargo hold, as if walking on flat ground amidst the increasingly violent turbulence of the cargo ship. The cargo box that held Sin had fallen into the corner of the cabin due to the turbulence. Xiaozi walked over and stretched out his hand to lift the welding rod. A cold light flashed between his 5 fingers, and the welding rod broke in the middle, and the lid of the cargo box was also lifted. In the box, Sin had already woken up. Although the shock of high voltage electricity still remained in his body, the eyes of the Jedi apprentice were very clear, which was particularly eye-catching in the space where the alarm lights were flashing. Xiaozi felt a little funny at this time. "This is also within your expectations?" Sin said. "I reminded you that this kind of failure requires the mobilization of the entire ship to repair it. How could you naively think that I would exclude myself from the scope of the whole ship?" Xiaozi didn't waste any more words. "Can you fix it?" "Of course I can." Sin was not polite either. "I dare to pierce the pipeline group. Of course I'm sure I can fix it. In fact, if you hadn't been so smart as to plot against me and delayed me, I would be more confident at this time." "Okay." Xiaozi rarely said more nonsense, just turned sideways and made way. He was not worried about Sin playing any tricks on the issue of repairing the ship. At this time, the condition of the spacecraft was extremely bad. Even someone like him who was not familiar with mechanical repair could see it with the naked eye. The corridor outside the cargo hold had begun to catch fire. If the spacecraft exploded in space, no one would survive, and that would definitely not be a result that a Jedi apprentice could accept. But, thinking that the situation would actually go beyond expectations to this extent, Xiaozi's calm face still had a slight ripple. Things seemed to be getting interesting. At this moment, Sin walked to the door, turned around and waved to him. "What are you standing there for? Come over here." Xiaozi was really stunned this time. "What did you say?" Sin smiled. "You are such a cute assassin. You know that all this isn't my plan, but you still naively think that you are not part of the whole ship's mobilization? I will need a laborer. No, a helper, when I repair the ship later. You are strong and healthy. I think you are the best choice." Chapter 111 Grassroots Personnel. On the giant camel cargo ship, the elderly captain kept wiping his sweat with a handkerchief, but whenever his eyes touched the shocking alarm signals on the dashboard, he would sweat more. He never expected that a freight trip that should have been safe would have so many waves out of thin air. It was even about to turn into a tragedy with the ship destroyed and people killed. According to the original plan, he was just traveling between Kun and Zun to sell some agricultural products and daily necessities, just like an ordinary freight captain. Although in theory, he is a subordinate intelligence officer of Kyankan security, the identity of the captain is just a cover, and providing intelligence to the security bureau is his job. But as the most grassroots staff, the meager salary of his job is not enough to support the old man's daily life. Or perhaps in the eyes of the security bureau, grassroots employees are not worthy of being human beings. So the old captain had to focus his main energy on operating freight, and only occasionally reported his experiences along the way to his superiors as required. Sometimes, he was so lazy that he would just resubmit the previous report without any changes. But no one asked about it. Although the life at the grassroots level was poor, it was also peaceful and comfortable. The only flaw was that the old man's family life was not very harmonious. He and his wife divorced early, leaving only a rebellious and annoying daughter. During this cargo business trip, the disobedient girl was crazy and insisted on coming to see the scenery of Zun. As soon as she got on the ship, she began to complain about her meager income and the financial difficulties of raising children. It was as if she was going to use the fatal trifecta of dad, poor, and money on her own father. The old captain was dizzy and dazed by his daughter's nagging, and he lost his mind for a while and started a contraband smuggling business in the deserted area of Zun. This was of course a violation of discipline, but in fact, there were not many subordinates of the security bureau who could honestly abide by the discipline. And until the old man finished purchasing goods in the deserted area, things were still going smoothly. After all, this was not the first time. From the captain to the crew, people were only slightly nervous, but more excited and expectant. As long as this batch of goods can pass through Zurging customs smoothly, according to past experience, they can probably pass through customs. As long as they raise the flag of the security bureau, then everyone can get a considerable dividend. Misfortune also came at this time. After the crew sorted out the smuggled goods in the cargo hold, they found that there was an inexplicable person in the hold. The man was short and ugly, but he exuded a terrifying murderous intent that made people's heart palpitate. The flat face like a mask was more terrifying than any evil ghost in a myth. He did not kill or injure, and just by his own temperament, he made everyone on the ship his captive. And when he took out the seal of the security bureau agent, the people on this giant camel-shaped cargo ship dared not have any second thoughts. From any angle, they had no ability to resist each other. Afterwards, according to the request of the agent, everyone deliberately docked the cargo ship in the deserted area for half a day to seduce a young man with a mysterious origin to board the ship. The boy was also a strange man. Although everyone was on full alert, he still managed to sneak onto the ship without them noticing. If it weren't for the reminder from the security agent, none of them would have noticed that the boy had sneaked into the cargo box. For many young crew members, the confrontation between the boy and the agent was like a fight between gods. Even watching from a distance was so exciting that it was dizzying. But the elderly captain became more and more worried. Because there has always been an old saying in the Kyan galaxy, when gods fight, the little devils suffer. Sure enough, the subsequent developments fully confirmed the old man's guess. The young man who fell into the trap had no intention of sitting back and waiting to die. His struggle in desperation directly led everyone on the ship into the abyss. As a senior captain, who has been doing business for more than 20 years, he knows very well that when there are so many alarm signals on the dashboard, even writing a suicide note is meaningless. After the spacecraft explodes, all records will become dust in space and disappear. Dad, what's going on? Just when the old man was at a loss, his daughter's voice came from behind him. The child who would never rest in peace was looking at his father with an extremely frightened expression and pleading eyes. They said the spaceship was going to explode. They must be lying to me, right? The old man looked at his daughter, who gave him a headache and made him feel distressed, and was speechless for a moment. However, at this moment, a bright red warning light on the dashboard suddenly went out in the old man's peripheral vision. The sudden change in color caught his attention, and then there was a burst of surprise. The temperature has dropped. How is it possible? But the old man was upset and immediately called the full-time mechanic on the cargo ship with the communicator. Xiao Tang, how is the scene? The voice of the always cheerful and old female mechanic did not come out of the communicator. After a long time, she said hesitantly, no, this is impossible. How can you do this? This is completely against common sense. The old captain was confused. Although he saw the warning lights on the dashboard going out one by one, this overly strange situation still made him feel uneasy. Xiao Tang, what's going on? The old captain's roar finally woke up the mechanic on the other end of the communicator. However, a moment later, the reply from the communicator was laughable. Captain, I don't know what's going on. That man is incredible. He was able to modify the engine on the spot. I have never heard that Skydome 3rd can be modified like this. Captain, you really should come to the scene to see it. The old captain was puzzled, but he was able to grasp the key points, so the spacecraft can be saved. An uncertain voice came from the communicator. I don't know either. I have never seen anyone modify it like this. It feels very risky. Almost at the same time, the alarm on the dashboard that had just been quiet for a while sounded again, and the entire spacecraft shook violently. A sigh came from the communicator. Oh, it's going to explode. The old captain was so angry. It's going to explode? You're still in the mood to watch the show after it exploded. The mechanic said confidently. Captain, there's nothing I can do except watch the show. Besides, after seeing such skills, it's worth it, even if we turn into cosmic dust with the explosion in the next moment. If you can really make it back alive, I will definitely kick you off the boat. Captain, if you can really make it back alive, with the unique skills I learned today, it will be more than enough for me to be a full-time mechanic in B Group. I knew you've been flirting with that maintenance factory in B Group. Chapter 112, The Host. As the captain and the mechanic argued, the cargo ship was in a violent turmoil again. This time, the old captain's anger was shaken away. He held the communicator tightly and asked exhaustedly, is there any hope? Give me a definite answer. This time, it was another voice that took over the communicator. The young man had a clear and soft voice, but it seemed to have incredible persuasiveness. Captain, if you want to be rescued, you need to take action. Now please return to your post and follow my instructions. First, please start the auxiliary thrusters with the captain's authority. However, before he finished speaking, the captain couldn't help but ask a series of questions. Who are you? Why do you order me? And what's the point of starting the thrusters now? No matter how nice the other person's voice was, it couldn't suppress the captain's natural anger in a critical moment. There was silence in the communicator for a moment, and the young voice sounded again, but it was obviously not talking to the captain. That idle guy over there, go deal with the captain. The word I was spoken in a light and cheerful tone, but it made the captain feel as if he was falling into an ice cave, as if the crisis of the spacecraft exploding was nothing compared to it. This is the security agent who calls himself Sunzi. He is also at the maintenance site at this time. And it sounds like the arrogant agent is now taking orders from someone! Exclamation mark. What is the situation at the scene? In fact, Xiaozi, who was at the scene, also felt that the current situation was absurd and even a little funny. This Jedi apprentice who was locked in a box by himself not long ago actually dared to give him an order? Question mark? The flat face gradually rippled with terrifying waves, and the thin lips drew an arc, and the murderous intent was brewing in the smile. Are you ordering me? However, Scene didn't mind at all. He replied calmly without turning his head, of course it's you. Do you think I'm busy here? Heh. If you have time to giggle, you might as well go and make that captain obey. If he doesn't cooperate, the spaceship will still explode. But remember not to kill anyone, unless you, a mechanical idiot, are sure that you can cooperate with my request. This time Xiaozi didn't answer, but Scene didn't need to look back to feel the chill behind him gradually dissipate. Obviously, Xiaozi had gone far away. Not long after, the pressure from the engine suddenly eased. Obviously, the problem on the bridge had been properly dealt with. After a while, Scene felt a chill coming from his back again, so he said honestly and bluntly, come and give me a hand. Replace the overloaded turbine while I'm welding the pipeline. Move quickly. After a pause, the young man said, "But it seems that you know nothing about mechanical repair, so please do what you can. Go and help me get the number 2 steel plate from the warehouse. You should be able to move things, right?" This almost provocative remark was said by Scene in an extremely calm tone, which made Xiaozi's smiling face show silver teeth for the first time. However, before this smile could bloom completely, Scene, who was facing away from him, stretched out his hand and said, "Arc wrench." Xiaozi's smile froze on the spot. Scene hooked his finger, showing a bit of impatience. "Arc wrench, don't you understand this?" At this time, the only professional mechanic on the scene stepped forward. Sister Tang handed a special oval wrench from her toolbox to Scene, and then looked forward to his performance with fanatical eyes. For a true mechanic, nothing could be more romantic than this scene. Even if the spaceship exploded at the next moment, she felt that her death was worth it. After Scene took the wrench, he did not disappoint Sister Tang. He immediately leaned forward, ignoring the surface heat of the overloaded engine, and endured the high temperature, using the wrench to force the 2 lines that were constantly spraying arcs together. The next moment, the slightly trembling engine, like a beast that had been fed, calmed down. This is really a miracle." Sister Tang gave a heartfelt praise. Scene shook his head, but he was still dissatisfied with his operation. The whole plan is actually a variation of the one that Zhuang Yuanying had demonstrated before. If Zhuang Yuanying were here, the efficiency would be at least twice as high as hers. If she still carried the special mechanic gun with her, the efficiency improvement might be 10 times higher. Scene rarely saw Shohrari's unparalleled mechanical touch and design talent even in the capital of the Galactic Republic. It was a pity that such a top genius was being ostracized by the world, and now only a mediocre person like himself was receiving praise on the spot. This ironic thought lingered in Scene's mind for only a moment, and he soon saw another overload damage in the engine, so he reached back again. "Refrigerant," Sister Tang said in embarrassment. "Sorry, we used it all up in the emergency just now." Scene pondered for a moment. That person over there, open the ceiling. After going up, there should be an automatic fire extinguishing device on the right hand side. "Bring me the storage tank of fire extinguishing foam." Xiaozi was stunned. "Are you talking about me? Who else?" Sister Tang volunteered. "Let me do it." Scene smiled and said, "No need, you come and help me stabilize these 2 lines with pipe clamps, and leave simple tasks such as dismantling things to low-end labor." Xiaozi, who was rated as a low-end laborer, was not angry or annoyed, but asked softly, "Do you think you have taken the initiative now? You can even surpass me?" Scene said, "I control the life and death of everyone on the ship, so unless you can put the life and death of everyone aside, I'm indeed above you. Okay, time is limited. Hurry up and bring me the fire extinguishing foam." At the end, Scene even spoke harshly, but after a sharp laugh, Xiaozi really did as Scene arranged, using her fingers to cut open the ceiling, and went to cut the foam tank in the automatic fire extinguisher. A moment later, the thin assassin came to Scene with a greasy dirty round tank, but Scene didn't even look at it, and pointed to the side. "Aim over there, and cut off the pressure valve." Xiaozi didn't ask any more questions, and used the sharp blade on her fingertips to cut off the pressure valve at the front of the can. Suddenly, a stream of snow-white foam shot out, but it all fell into the air. Although Xiaozi didn't know how to repair a machine, she had a vague intuition that this action didn't seem to have anything to do with repairing the engine. So when the foam was finished, he frowned and asked, "What does this mean?" At this time, Scene just unscrewed the last screw with a wrench, stood up and smiled. "The engine maintenance is complete, and we need to celebrate. I think the picture of the foam flying should be very beautiful, so." Before he finished speaking, several sharp and pressing cold lights flashed in front of Scene's eyes. It was Xiaozi's flying blade sneak attack, which was extremely tricky and sharp. However, Scene was not in a hurry about it. As if he had predicted the future, he waved the oval wrench in his hand to face the cold light. After a few ding-dong crisp sounds, the wrench was cut into countless pieces by the flying blade, but the sharp weapon's sudden attack ended there. At the same time, Xiaozi, who was rushing straight at him, was kicked by Scene and flew up and hung on the wall. Scene smiled and said, "It seems that your mentality is not always so calm." The so-called perverted killer is just an ordinary person who will be impotent and furious after being provoked. Chapter 113 Hidden. The next moment, after being provoked by Sin's words, Xiaozi's eyes turned to Sister Tang. Sin said, "We have only completed the first stage of maintenance. There are still many things to do. If you kill her, just wait for the spaceship to explode." Xiaozi did not reply directly, but stared at Sister Tang with her narrow eyes. Sister Tang was terrified by the stare, and quickly hid behind Sin, and then said, "Indeed, the current emergency repair is only a temporary solution. If the next engine cannot be stopped quickly, the explosion will be more severe." Sin added, "Thanks to your previous plot against me, the damage to the spaceship is much more serious than I expected. Now, except for the engine, all parts of the spaceship need to be maintained by manpower. Otherwise, even if the spaceship does not explode, the loss of air and temperature is enough to be fatal. In addition, if the communication array cannot be repaired, we will not even have the opportunity to send a distress signal. Next, we can only float like space junk, waiting for a spaceship passing by at some unknown time to rescue us." After a pause, Sin also smiled, but his smile seemed to be somewhat similar to Xiaozi's. "In short, everyone on this ship is useful, at least more useful than a perverted murderer. If you really want to kill someone, you'd better start with yourself." Ha 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 ha. Xiaozi suddenly burst into an unprecedented laugh, and his flat, expressionless face actually showed an overflowing spirit. "It's really interesting, it's great." Xiaozi laughed and said intermittently, "I thought it was a boring mission, but you really make me happy, ha ha ha." After saying that, Xiaozi suddenly disappeared, and even Sin couldn't catch his figure. Letting an assassin disappear from perception undoubtedly means a great risk, but Sin secretly breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. The perverted killer should have temporarily given up the tit-for-tat with him. During this period of time, Sin could barely act freely. This feeling is actually very subtle. The other party is obviously a perverted person whose behavior logic is completely difficult to guess, but Sin feels as if he can understand his thinking to a certain extent and predict his actions. That's why Sin would provoke him and even tease him, because he felt that those actions would not touch Xiaozi's bottom line and would not make him furious and kill people. On the contrary, it would make him obedient. Of course, this was not because Xiaozi was afraid of death. Sin knew very well that the other party was a madman who would put his own life and death aside for the sake of killing people. It was even more impossible that he cherish Sin's life. As Xiaozi said before, he didn't care about Sin's life or death at all. It was the bigwigs in the security bureau who should care about Sin. So, what did Xiaozi care about? Sin didn't have an accurate answer in his heart, but he felt that the most important thing for that person should be the word interesting. Because it was interesting, he would release Sin from the cargo box. Because it was interesting, he would follow Sin and watch him take the lead in repairing the spacecraft. Because it was interesting, he could even tolerate being teased by Sin. Anyway, up to now, no matter how much Sin did, it didn't matter to the overall situation. After the spaceship was repaired, Xiaozi still had the initiative. When the spaceship arrived at the space city, Sin could only surrender. But Sin certainly would not sit back and watch the situation develop. What he was going to do next was the key to breaking the situation. Even in Xiaozi's opinion, that thing was probably not interesting. That's why he had to do everything he could to get Xiaozi out of the way. Now that Xiaozi had taken the initiative to withdraw, Sin finally breathed a sigh of relief. But just when he was halfway relieved, he heard a slightly fanatical voice from his side. "Master, what are we going to do next?" Sin looked at the short-haired and sturdy female mechanic with a smile. He never thought that he had gained an admirer on this cargo ship just by mechanically imitating Zhuang Yuanying's unique skills. In fact, objectively speaking, this Sister Tang's skills are quite powerful. When she cooperated with Sin in the maintenance work, she handled many details more skillfully than the young apprentice. The reason why she was so convinced was that Zhuang Yuanying's ideas and technology of reducing Skydome 3rd to Skydome Wilderness were too advanced and shocking. But for Sin, this fangirl was really a trouble. What was to be done next might not be understood by Xiaozi, who was hiding in the dark, but Sister Tang, who was experienced but lacked some theoretical attainments. could probably see the clues. Scene then fell into deep thought. Should he keep the next thing secret from her, or try to win her cooperation? From the original intention of the Jedi apprentice, of course, he should treat others with sincerity, not to mention that the next thing was not just about himself. But at this moment, feeling the wound caused by the high voltage electric gun on his waist that was still aching, the smile on Scene's face seemed to be covered by a mask. Next, let's repair the other engine. The damage there is less serious. If it can be repaired, maybe the spacecraft can resume its navigation ability. Sister Tang nodded repeatedly after hearing this. That's right. If the other engine can be repaired to 70% or 80% of the level, the cargo ship can barely move. Alas, I definitely can't do it. Fortunately, you, the master, are on the ship. This fanatical mechanic seemed to be completely unaware that Scene was the culprit who caused the disaster, but instead regarded him as a savior. Scene heard this and felt a little complicated, but the temporary disturbance did not affect his next action. Sister Tang, check the toolbox again. A few wrenches were broken just now. Don't be without spare ones. Sister Tang smiled and said, don't worry, I'll get a few more when I pass by the warehouse later. Scene also smiled. If the low-end labor is still there, it would be perfect for him to get it. The two talked and laughed, as if the crisis of the spacecraft had been resolved. While Sister Tang was checking the toolbox, Scene quietly reached out and planted a hidden move near the engine that had been repaired behind him. However, in a hurry, his hand was careless and made a sound. Bang! The crisp sound made Sister Tang's ears move, but before she could study it carefully, she heard Scene start to explain the technical tips of the engine modification just now. At this moment, the experienced mechanic immediately cleared the doubts that had just arisen in her heart and focused on Scene's explanation. Chapter 114 Distinguishing between friends and enemies. The subsequent maintenance work went quite smoothly. Without Xiaozi's interference, Scene quickly took control of the spacecraft. The old captain, who still felt incredible about all these changes, was carried out of the bridge by several of his long-trusted subordinates, so that Scene could take over the whole thing, with Scene taking the lead in commanding the overall situation and Sister Tang, a senior mechanic, assisting. Several key points on the spacecraft with the most serious damage were quickly repaired one by one. During this period, the other people on the ship were not idle either, and they all checked for deficiencies and made up for the gaps in the maintenance work. Soon, the flames on the spacecraft that had been rising and falling were finally completely extinguished, and the main energy pipelines were reconnected. One of the two engines was paralyzed, and the other was repaired by more than 80% and could barely be used. Next, as long as Scene could control the spacecraft and turn it back to Zun, this crisis would be officially resolved. But of course, there is no such cheap good thing in the world. Just after he checked the last maintenance item, Xiaozi, who had disappeared for a long time, appeared in front of him again. The game is over. The security agent with a calm expression announced Scene's ending in a calm voice. The spaceship has been repaired, and you are finished. Then, he raised one hand and waved it at Scene, saying, everyone on the ship, take him down for me. This time, the crew on the cargo ship was no longer as flexible as they were at the beginning. They hesitated and looked embarrassed. Even though Xiaozi had clearly revealed his threatening murderous intentions, he still couldn't mobilize the crew. This is not to say that Scene's repair work has won him prestige, so that everyone doesn't want to be his enemy. After all, he is the culprit for the crisis of the spaceship, and only Sister Tang on the spaceship worships him unconditionally. It's really that the people on the ship were frightened by the consequences of the fight between gods. Whether it is the flat-faced security agent or the young heroic boy, they dare not offend either side, and they don't even dare to let them fight again on the ship. No matter how tough this giant camel-shaped cargo ship is, it can't stand the second toss. Seeing that many crew members did not obey his orders, Xiaozi did not get angry. Instead, he withdrew his hand and chuckled. It was just a joke. How could I let you go up and fight him like this? After saying this, many crew members breathed a sigh of relief, but Scene felt his scalp tingling and his muscles tensed. Yes, with the style of a perverted killer, how could he just talk without taking actual actions to establish his authority? Sure enough, just when Xiaoxi's smile was not over, his fingertips burst into a flash of cold light, and the flying blades hidden in the cuffs and metal gloves went straight to the neck of a crew member next to him. Scene reacted quickly, and exploded almost at the same time. He jumped over the 3-meter distance between him and Xiaoxi, but even so, his movements were still a little slow. At the critical moment, Scene pushed his right hand forward, and an invisible huge force crossed the remaining distance and hit Xiaoxi's wrist, which bounced the flying blades away just right. Xiaoxi's narrow eyes finally blossomed with spirit. He ignored the severe pain in his wrist that was almost broken, and instead raised the corners of his mouth and laughed heartily. "That's right, little guy, show me one more time." Scene certainly wouldn't give him a chance. Just when Xiaoxi's right hand fell weakly, he had already taken another step forward and rushed in front of Xiaoxi, using the most unpretentious collision to push him against the wall of the corridor. The collision of flesh and blood and metal made a heart-pounding muffled sound, and there was a faint sound of ribs breaking. However, Xiaoxi was unaware of it. With a flick of his uninjured left hand, a knuckle-long flying blade shot out, still aiming at the innocent crew member next to him. This time, Scene finally couldn't react in time. Although he barely stretched out his hand to stop it, he could only watch the flying blade sink into the chest of a crew member. The injury was not fatal, but it was enough to cause panic. The crew members around him scattered and never dared to watch the scene of the gods fighting again. Xiaoxi said with a cough, "I will put all those who run away into the account." The crew members stopped immediately after hearing this. Scene sneered, "The perverted killer has run out of tricks and only knows how to keep accounts of killings." Xiaoxi also sneered, but his smile was much more ferocious and terrifying than Scene's. "You are wrong. I don't keep accounts of killings. If I put it into the account, it will only make his life worse than death. Even if he begs me to kill him, I will not do it." At this time, Xiaoxi was clearly pushed against the wall by Scene and could not get away, but these words seemed to form a real threat, especially when his slender eyes swept around. The crew members who were swept by them really didn't dare to act rashly. After all, the crew members who were injured by the flying blade just now were only injured but not dead. If they were really put into the account by the security agent, the consequences would be disastrous. Scene took a breath, put more strength in his hands, and tightly held the other's shoulders. But he felt more and more troubled in his heart. This short assassin actually had such a strong deterrent power, which was beyond his expectations. With just a few words and an expression, he frightened the people around him and made them dare not move rashly. This was a bit troublesome. All of these crew members surrounding him were perfect hostages for Xiaoxi. As long as Xiaoxi kept shooting flying blades around, Scene would have a headache. The flying blade did not hurt the crew's vital parts just now, but that was because the flying blade was somewhat affected by Scene's impact when it was shot. Otherwise it would not fall on the chest but the throat. And now how many flying blades Xiaoxi had in his hand, Scene had no idea at all, and he had no idea what other weapons he had besides the flying blades. So Scene was not sure that he could protect these crew members well. Just now, when Xiaoxi's flying blade injured people and the crew members scattered, he was secretly relieved. He didn't expect that he would not be able to escape from the trouble after all. So now there is only one way for Scene. Solve this assassin, and all the troubles will naturally disappear. But just when Scene made up his mind, he felt a sudden loosening in front of him. Xiaoxi used incredible means to dismantle the joints of his shoulders, slid through Scene's arms, and dodged to the side. Scene hurriedly tried to catch up, but Xiaoxi swept his toes, and a sharp blade shot out from the sole of his shoe, stopping just in front of the throat of a crew member next to him. "Now, retreat," Xiaoxi threatened with a smile, and at the same time, his toes were restrained, and the sharp blade cut a thin gash on the crew member's neck, and blood flowed out. Scene took a breath, but did not retreat a single step. Although the young Jedi apprentice was kind, he was not a fool. Giving in at this time would not solve the problem. On the contrary, if he fell, no one on the ship would be able to control Xiaoxi, so he could not retreat anyway. As for the hostage issue, the Jedi were not omniscient and omnipotent gods. There was no point in doing something that could not be done. However, just when Scene had made up his mind, Xiaoxi took back the sharp blade on his toes and smiled mockingly. "Don't you think this is ridiculous? I'm threatening you with your enemies, and you actually accepted it? Scene sighed in his heart. This was indeed ridiculous. Because the ones who had used the high voltage electric gun to plot against him before were these miserable and innocent looking crew members. They were no longer real crew members at this time, but had become the running dogs of the security bureau. They were undoubtedly hostile to each other. But Scene could clearly see that most of the crew members actually just wanted to play the role of an ordinary crew member. This trap was not their intention, but they were purely coerced. This can also be seen from Xyz's attitude towards the crew members. Therefore, although Scene could not treat the crew members as friendly forces, it was also difficult for him to be cruel enough to let them be slaughtered. It was just that Scene was not stupid enough to give up resistance because of the threat from the other party. Xyz then said, consider this question. If I had not used these crew members as hostages, but had mobilized them to fight against you in groups from the beginning, would you still have such compassion? Scene's heart moved, and he immediately eliminated that trace of distracting thoughts from his mind. But Xyz had already caught Scene's hesitation, and smiled leisurely. Of course you are not naive enough to show mercy to the enemy. But consider another question. What is the boundary between the so-called enemy and me? Were the three people holding high voltage electric guns enemies? While speaking, Xyz stretched out his hand and pointed to the distance. Scene immediately raised his hand and caught the flying blade that Xyz had ejected in midair. At the same time, out of the corner of his eye, Scene also saw a trembling middle-aged crew member not far behind him. That person was the crew member who had used the high voltage electric gun to plot against him with a grin. Looking at the face distorted by fear, Scene's heart was also complicated. This person pretended to be a mechanic and took advantage of the close proximity to plot against him. He was so focused on guarding against Xyz that he didn't notice the change in his elbows and armpits and was immediately caught. He was almost packaged and sealed and sent to a place of house arrest. If the other crew members were just coerced by Xyz, then the grim smile on this person's face at the time was enough to explain his position. There is no doubt that this is an enemy, and an enemy that is not worth saving at all. No matter how kind-hearted the Jedi are, they would not save an enemy who wants to take their lives in a crisis. But Scene knew that Xyz's problems had just begun. Chapter 115, Conscience. What if I said that they listened to my rumors and mistakenly thought you were a murderous maniac? If you don't strike first, you might kill everyone on the ship. Xyz's tone was still frivolous, but it made Scene's heart move. Because what the other party said was indeed very possible. Before instigating the enemy, it is a common behavior to label the opponent a villain first. What's more, what he did at that time was truly an act of a complete villain, and it seemed reasonable for someone to attack him with a high voltage electric gun with a grin. And Xyz smiled again. Although there is no regular staff on this ship, each of them is registered by the Security Bureau. On weekdays, the Security Bureau pays them a meager salary, forcing these people to focus on making a living outside of their jobs, and their loyalty to the Security Bureau is quite questionable. But if they cause any trouble, the Security Bureau will definitely hold them accountable, and none of them can escape. Needless to say about these people, as long as I call, the Security Bureau will use its means to make their lives worse than death. Even their parents and family members will be implicated. The elderless pensions will be deducted, those who have jobs will be fired by their units, and those children will live under the pointing and criticizing of their classmates and teachers. When Xyz said this, his tone was soft and delicate, as if he was telling a vivid story, but the scene he described made the trembling crew members even more sad, and some even cried out. At this point, Xyz changed the subject. If now, I use the lives of these people and the situation of their families to threaten you, and ask you to give up resistance, will you obey? Without waiting for Scene to answer, Xyz asked again. Or, I simply want everyone on this boat to capture you at all costs, then facing the poor people who are desperately rushing towards you. Can you do it? Consider another question. What if I tell you that some of these people are actually spies planted by the Security Bureau from the beginning? They are perverted murderers similar to me, and now they are just pretending to be innocent. When the melee starts, they will mercilessly aim at your vital points. What will you do? You should think like this. Good people should naturally show mercy, but bad people don't have to. If you have the strength to spare, try to capture instead of killing. If you really don't have the strength to spare, there is no need to be hypocritical. Then the question arises again, what is the standard for a good person? What is the standard for a bad person? Where is the boundary between the two? What is the standard for leaving some strength? If you are soft-handed for a moment and the consequences backfire, then was it wrong to leave some strength at that time? One question after another came out from those thin lips, and Scene's mind gradually became a little messy. He knew very well that the other party was deliberately disturbing his mind, but he had to admit that Xyz's questions were really tricky and hit him at the point of confusion at this moment. Scene knew a long time ago that the world cannot be simply divided into right and wrong, good and evil. The balance that the Jedi pursued is based on the complexity of the world. However, to achieve this word balance, how easy is it? Strength, wisdom, and benevolence are all indispensable. Those who can easily control this balance are the top figures among the Jedi. Scene is just a young apprentice, and of course he cannot give a perfect answer. In fact, he does not demand that he can be perfect in everything. When it really comes to the last resort, just do your best. Afterwards, reflect on the lessons learned. If there are any flaws or mistakes, wait for the master to teach them carefully. Scene has always been like this in his attitude towards things. Not all questions can be answered, and he is never omniscient. However, when these doubts were asked by the enemy in the most straightforward way, Scene was indeed a little confused. At this time, he even couldn't help but think of the teammates, or former teammates, of the Red Apricot squad. If Ping and others were here, they would definitely make a judgment without hesitation. They would directly raise their middle fingers to Xyz, and then go all out. As for the crew members around, even the most slick and dishonest Zubo would never raise his eyelids, and they would be killed. If they were killed, they could only blame them for what they deserved. Who made them take this boat? In fact, Ping and others had their youth and innocence, and they must have had difficulties in facing these problems. It's just that after years of tempering, they have found their own answers. Unfortunately, Scene is not Ping, and it is impossible for him to directly refer to their answers, so his confusion is inevitable now. Xyz seemed to be still not satisfied with this. On that flat face, the smile was less exaggerated and more sincere. Then he asked the last question. Why do you think I said these words to you? This time, Scene gave a rare response. To delay time, right? In fact, although Scene had done his best to turn the tide in adversity, the situation was still not optimistic for him. Because the barely repaired spaceship was still sailing steadily towards the direction of the space city, and returning home was extremely difficult. With Xyz's deterrence, no one on the ship dared to betray the security bureau and control the spaceship to turn around. Even if Scene captured Xyz with great power, most of the people on the ship would cry and beg Scene not to return home. Moreover, although Scene had the upper hand at this time, he was not very sure that he could capture Xyz. As time passed, the chance to return home was also passing by bit. In fact, the spaceship was on the verge of explosion and now it was repaired and sailing hard, and the losses in all aspects were extremely huge. As the spaceship got further and further away, returning home was a huge risk from a technical point of view. As long as Xyz could delay enough time, no matter how hard Scene tried to control the situation on the spaceship, it would be difficult for the spaceship to turn around. However, Scene's answer was rejected in a mocking manner. Wrong, totally wrong. You are underestimating the IQ of your opponent. Xyz smiled and raised his hand, pointing to his brain. Although his arm was shaking constantly, and his movements looked funny due to the severe contusion of his shoulder joint, Scene was nervous at this moment. I have guessed what you are going to do next. Can you guess what I guessed? Scene's expression did not change, but his heartbeat inevitably became faster. Faintly, he had an ominous premonition. It was not a casual joke, but an extremely serious ominous premonition. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116 Indirect. The next moment, the answer was revealed, and it was not a fluke. Your last chance to turn the tables is when the spacecraft lands, right? Before Xiaozi finished speaking, Xin had already shot forward and hit Xiaozi like lightning. The thin security bureau agent was knocked away like a rag, and then Xin stepped forward and punched him in midair. The sound of flesh and blood colliding with the metal floor made the people around shudder, and also made the most radical crew members who wanted to help Xiaozi retreat. Xin attacked mercilessly and finally succeeded in capturing Xiaozi, and even made the other party suffer serious injuries that made it difficult for him to fight again. But after succeeding, he was not happy at all, because the matter was still not over. Although he was sure that Xiaozi was really badly injured, with the difference in strength between the two sides, there was no room for struggle. But the process just now was indeed a bit suspicious. In the split second of being severely injured by the surprise attack, although Xiaozi had no way to resist, he had enough opportunities to kill innocent people. The flying blades in his gloves and sleeves were sharp hidden weapons that gave even Jedi apprentices a headache. If he aimed at innocent crew members and fired randomly at that moment, it would surely cause heavy casualties. The reason why Xin allowed him to talk at length before was that he was not sure enough that he could counter his flying blades. Xin himself might be able to barely avoid injury, but he definitely could not protect those not so innocent crew members. It was not until Xiaozi turned out Xin's last trump card that Xin finally couldn't bear it anymore. He would rather bear innocent casualties and control Xiaozi. But unexpectedly, Xiaozi had no intention of killing innocent people at all. This was really strange, because Xin didn't think that the other party would be the type of person who would be merciful. Although this thin man who called himself a perverted killer had not killed anyone from beginning to end, Xin had no doubt that he could kill hundreds or thousands of people when necessary. This was a very subtle resonance, as if the other party's thoughts flowed into his mind like a trickle. Of course, Xin really didn't want to resonate with this pervert. On the floor, Xiaozi laughed with a cough. I wonder why I don't kill people. Because, if those people were killed by me, it would be too boring. To me, human life is not a number, but fresh and beating blood and flesh, so I won't waste anyone's life. I want to watch those fresh lives disappear in your hands. When the spacecraft fails to land and crashes in the space city, every life that disappears here is thanks to you. At this moment, Xin's pupils suddenly contracted, and the biggest worry in his heart was exposed by his opponent's direct cut. Xiaozi laughed while coughing. I wonder why I can guess it. That's right, I'm not good at mechanics, so I can't tell what you did to the spacecraft. But at least I have a brain. If I were you, the only link that could turn the tables would be the landing of the spacecraft. If you don't do it here, where else can you do it? Xin had to take a deep breath to calm down. The trick he regarded as a trump card was actually seen through by this agent, who didn't know mechanics. Creating an accident when the spacecraft landed, forcing the spacecraft to land in other areas of the space city, and escaping in the chaos. This was the escape plan Xin designed for himself. It was also his only feasible plan. In fact, Xin had given up the idea of returning home when he led the crowd to repair the spacecraft. Because this giant camel-shaped cargo ship failed to repair it in the first time, one of its two engines was paralyzed and one was forced to be temporarily modified. The rest of the parts were also damaged, and the navigation status was actually very fragile. If the ship were to turn around and return, it would most likely crash into the asteroid belt and be smashed to pieces. Instead, the route to the space city, Li, ahead was much safer. So Xin didn't care about delaying time at all. He couldn't go back anyway, so he might as well go to Li with peace of mind. As for deliberately putting on an anxious attitude, it was just to hide his true intentions. His deepest concern was only about the possible casualties caused by the crash of the ship. Unexpectedly, all of this was seen through by the opponent. Don't worry, even if I see through you, I won't stop you. Xiaozi lay on the ground, speaking softly in a voice that only the two of them could hear. As for those other people, they don't even have brains, so naturally they can't stop you. So you will succeed. Kyankan security is not strong in Li. In fact, because of Nanhela's death, there has been constant chaos within the Kyankan group, and everyone is even in danger. The manpower that the Security Bureau can freely dispatch has also become very limited, and it's too late to put out fires everywhere. Otherwise, the director wouldn't have to set an ambush to eliminate you and your master in person. Now, the reason why we can keep your dear master under house arrest is mostly because of her self-awareness. As for a nobody like you, the power allocated to you is even more limited. If I hadn't happened to act in the deserted area this time, they couldn't even organize a capture operation. Now there are not many people coming to take over, and they are basically concentrated in the port area. According to the plan, I should seal you in a box and have a fully armed security soldier driving an armored airship to pick you up. Then you will be placed under house arrest in the Shiangsuan district, and you will not be given any chance to escape. But if the plan changes, for example, the spacecraft suddenly crashes into other areas of Lee, the Security Bureau's configuration in Lee will not be able to respond in time. Then, you can take advantage of the chaos to escape. Lee is the most chaotic place in the Kyan galaxy, not to mention the Security Bureau. Even the will of the Kyankan group cannot cover every corner of the space city. You have plenty of opportunities to hide there, or even wait for an opportunity to escape. After that, whether you go back to Zun to seek refuge from your silver dads, or rush to Zurging to join your master in Lee, everything is possible. Xiaozi's tone was still delicate and soft, as if telling a vivid story, and Sin was involuntarily attracted to it, his heart pounding. Everything Xiaozi described was the escape plan that Sin had designed for himself when he was seeking a comeback in adversity, and Xiaozi even described it in more detail than he had imagined. Staying in Lee for a while and avoiding the limelight before going to Zurging was indeed very attractive to him. In the final analysis, he escaped from the base of the Red Apricot Squad just to see his master, and the price of all this is so meager, just a few lives. Hearing the word price, Sin immediately calmed down and asked, "What's the benefit of this to you?" "As a perverted murderer, killing is the biggest benefit," Xiaozi said, "but when did I say that I must kill people with my own hands? It's more interesting to let those people die in your hands." Chapter 117 Full. When Sin heard the news, he was startled at first, then suddenly realized, and his heart was immediately filled with a complex feeling that made him dizzy, bitter, stinging, and resentful. At this point, Sin finally understood Xiaozi's full intention. After Sin escaped, why did he deliberately stop using the crew's power? Why did he use the crew members who were originally in the same camp as hostages? Why did he let Sin do something on the spacecraft? Everything this perverted murderer did was to make Sin's hands stained with the blood of innocent people. If they were not innocent in the first place, then Xiaozi would make them innocent. This person went through so much trouble, but this is all he wanted? Question mark? Because this trick works best for people like you. If it were those old veterans, they wouldn't even blink an eye, even if everyone on the ship died tragically in front of them, but you would be obsessed with it endlessly, as if the deaths of these insignificant people would poke you in your heart like a wound. Then as a perverted murderer, how could I not understand the principle of killing someone and destroying their heart? When Xiaozi said this, he almost laughed out loud, regardless of the injuries in his chest and abdomen. Of course, you can also think more open-mindedly. These crew members are all from the Security Bureau after all, and they have received subsidies. They used high-voltage electric guns to attack you before. They are out-and-out enemies. You are alone, surrounded by enemies. How can you show mercy? Even if these people suffered heavy casualties, it is their own fault and has nothing to do with you. Or you can tell yourself that those who achieve great things do not care about trivial matters. Compared with the mission you and your master and apprentice are responsible for, the lives of a few crew members are not important at all. If you ruin the big thing because of a moment of kindness at this time and place, it would be irresponsible to the entire galaxy. Or, you can also point to those tearful trash and say that they are all running dogs of the Security Bureau, assassins who set traps to ambush you, and harmful poisons that destroy the overall situation of the Kyan galaxy. In this way, the more they die, the better. Xiaozi couldn't help but stop talking when she said this. Because Sin's expression was no longer deep, the young Jedi apprentice smiled with a sense of relief. "You've said too much. Actually, you should have stopped talking about killing people and destroying their hearts. The hypothetical conditions you wanted to use to block my retreat were unnecessary. So, you're actually worried, right? Worried that I'm not shaken enough. Worried that the killing and destroying of my heart won't work well enough. Worried that I won't be willing to die and surrender. As he spoke, Scene stood up and took a deep breath. However, as you said, I will seize the only opportunity to break free from the trap and then completely crush all your conspiracies. Zazie chuckled and said, at any cost? Scene didn't answer, but stepped on Zazie's chest, causing him to completely hold his breath and faint. He had heard enough of those disturbing words. Scene admitted that he really couldn't answer many of Zazie's questions, and many of his words really pierced his heart like a dagger. But so what? Scene is not a Jedi master, so why bother to answer questions that he can't answer? Why bother to force yourself to get entangled in difficult problems that you can't think of? The Milky Way is so big, and there are so many injustices that cannot be dealt with. Can Scene deal with them one by one? He can't even figure out the problem of the dragon people. So, he will listen to Zazie's words, and he will think seriously about those tricky questions, and even feel sad about them, because these are the necessary training and sufferings for a Jedi apprentice. How can an apprentice not experience difficulties? But he will not be entangled in this, and will not delay his work, because of his own obsession. Now he has to break free from the trap, and go to Zajing to meet his master. The importance of this matter is above all else. So, it is okay to say that at all costs. And it was at this time that the spacecraft finally passed the long journey and arrived in front of the space city. Scene also turned around at this time and said to the crew members who were still panicking, everyone, please be prepared for the impact next. The spacecraft will not land at the port as usual, but will fall into the area near the port. At this time, it was not far from the end, and Scene had to start early warning. Even if you really don't care about the cost, you can't treat human life as worthless. You should try your best to do your best. The crew members had different reactions. Most of them were still confused and immersed in fear and confusion. The old captain had guessed the clues, and his sad face was full of disbelief. The most perceptive one was the ship's mechanic, Sister Tang. This strong woman slapped her forehead and exclaimed, "Did you overload the engine? Did you connect 2 more sets of amplification pipelines at that time? Your hands are really fast. I only heard something strange, but I didn't expect it was to crash the spacecraft." But why did you crash the spacecraft? After hearing these simple words, Scene couldn't help but sigh secretly, and he had nothing to say. No matter when and for what, it is still difficult to hide the guilt of deceiving a simple person by nature. The tricks he did on the spacecraft engine were not very sophisticated in terms of technique. He just connected 2 more amplification pipelines in the engine that should not be connected together, causing the energy in the engine to accumulate continuously. When the spacecraft entered the landing mode, the engine would be overwhelmed and exploded, and then crashed out of control. At that time, due to time constraints, Scene had no time to do it too carefully, and the flaws in his hands were heard by Sister Tang on the spot. However, Sister Tang was obsessed with Zhuang Yuanying's engine modification plan at the time. She had countless questions and endless obsessions in her mind, but she did not doubt Scene at all. Now that this question was asked by her, it really had some heavy weight. Scene was silent for a while, and said frankly, "There are enemies in the port waiting for me to fall into the trap. In order to catch them by surprise and avoid the ambush, I can only resort to this last resort." Scene did not expect to be recognized by the crew for this answer. After all, no matter how early warning is given, the accidental crash of the spacecraft is uncontrollable and accompanied by high risks. But in order to carry more cargo, this giant camel-shaped cargo ship removed almost all the escape pods. Chapter 118 Return to Space City. For the giant camel-shaped cargo ship, the lack of an escape pod means that there is no guarantee of safety. Once the spaceship is recovered, even Scene himself is not sure that he can survive the strong impact. As for the other crew members, as expected, after he told it frankly, some of the crew members were immediately filled with righteous indignation, led by the original bitter-faced old captain. The bitter-faced old man immediately glared at Scene and took out his gun and aimed at Scene. "Don't even think about it. This cargo ship is an important tool for him to maintain his life, and it is also his home for many years. How could he let a stranger crash it? Exclamation mark. The other crew members also reacted, and their anger surged. Even if they didn't feel sorry for this giant camel-shaped cargo ship, they knew the risk of the spacecraft crashing. This simple and strong cargo ship does not have too many safety devices, at least not enough to protect each of them. SYN is putting everyone in danger for his own selfishness. But before they could vent their anger, a coldness that came over them extinguished their enthusiasm. SYN's face darkened, and he spoke softly. I have made up my mind. Please don't resist. Although his voice was soft, before he finished speaking, SYN had already punched the wall next to him. With his flesh and blood body strengthened by the force, he dented the metal wall. Such a deterrent immediately calmed the crew. Before, Zazi had made them all tremble. Now Zazi was lying on the ground and his life or death was unknown. How could they have the courage to provoke an obviously stronger opponent? After SYN was shocked by the scene, he immediately began to give orders. Everyone, start to act immediately. Find a safe place in the spaceship to fix yourself. Remember to avoid the bow. That's it. After saying that, SYN acted before everyone else. He went straight to the old captain, grabbed the indignant old man's wrist, and dragged him to the bow bridge. At this time, there were only 2 old robots in the bridge, still in the driving position, to maintain the normal navigation of the spaceship. The previous series of fights between SYN and Zazi, and even the crisis of the spacecraft almost exploding, seemed to be insignificant to them. SYN ignored them, and walked to the captain's position, to connect to the communication with the port tower of the space city. This is a necessary procedure for the spacecraft to legally land in the space city. Of course, it is also the proof that this giant camel can safely pass through the defense circle of Lee. SYN turned his head and said to the old captain, if you don't want to be blown to pieces by the artillery fire of the space city here, please perform your duties as a captain. The old captain clenched his fists, wishing to die with the man next to him, and turn into dust in space together. But this thought only lasted for a moment. If he really had the courage to die together, he would have died together. When Zazi boarded the ship, he had already exhausted his last courage by drawing his gun and pointing it at SYN. Thinking of the daughter on the ship, who was unruly by nature, but showed a weak expression to him in a critical moment, all the persistence in the old man's heart turned into water. Even if he was held accountable by the security bureau afterwards, it was better than watching himself, his daughter, and his bastards die in space. After thinking this through, the old man smiled helplessly, and then reported the code of his trip to the tower of the space city, Lee, through the communicator. Harvest, applies for docking, target location 177, special code, 13,162,162. The last string of numbers made the tower of the port silent for a while, and the staff responsible for coordinating the landing said in a friendly voice, "No 177 is open to you. I wish you a happy time in Lee." Then, the old man leaned back and fell on the captain's chair, closing his eyes tightly, as if his life had come to an end at this moment. But the next moment he was picked up by SYN. When the spaceship crashes, this is the most unsafe place. Please go to the middle and rear of the spaceship for shelter. SYN said, according to the structural design of the giant camel, when the spaceship crashes and hits hard, the middle and rear will bear the least impact. The old man opened his eyes and spat. No need for you to show off. For this cargo ship that has experienced vicissitudes, no one can be more familiar with it than the old captain. SYN smiled and said, that's good. I wish you good luck. After that, he pushed the captain out of the bridge and stayed here alone, watching the lights of the space city become brighter and brighter in front of him. The moment when the engine was completely detonated was getting closer and closer. With the heavy-headed structure of the giant camel-shaped cargo ship, once the spaceship lost control in midair and crashed, the bow bridge would undoubtedly be the most dangerous place, but SYN would rather take more risks and stand in the place with the widest field of vision to see the space city in front of him more carefully, because what to do in the next few minutes is the key to determining the future direction. After the spaceship lost control, where would it fall, and how would he escape from the ambush of Kyankan security in the chaos? All of this required him to use this limited time to observe the terrain of the space city more carefully before making a judgment. Although the contents of the free guidebook distributed when he came to Lee last time were still in Scene's mind, but he also knew that the contents of the high-sounding manual should not be taken too seriously. The manual would not tell people how many filthy places there were in this magnificent space city, nor would it tell people that there would be extremely rampant thieves in the magnificent Shiangsuan district, nor would it tell people about the intrigues of the dignitaries in the Shiangsuan Jade building. It would not even tell people that the clean and busy port might welcome a crashed cargo ship. Soon, Scene had taken the time to write down all the information he wanted, and then ignored the two dull robots, and took over the control from the captain's position, pushing the joystick a little awkwardly, driving the giant camel slightly off course. Scene has already identified the crash site of the spacecraft, and from now on, he has to prepare for the crash. Chapter 119 Warning. Just as the giant camel was slowly driving on a troubled journey, in the port area of Lee, a group of security soldiers were already waiting impatiently. It has been a long time since the agreed handover time, but there is still no trace of the goods that should have arrived. Their 53 fully armed security warriors could only poke around stupidly in this bustling and noisy port, motionless, as if they had become a landscape that was pointed at by passers-by. It would be fine if passers-by could add more kind words to their comments and praise them for their strict military discipline. However, the traveling merchants and travelers who came and went here did not pay any attention to the solemn attitude of these security soldiers, and all kinds of ridicule and sarcasm were heard endlessly. What are those people doing? Are they performing galactic performance art? Asked an Ishtibu man who is curious about everything and is patient and meticulous. Next to him, a tall and lanky friend from Nemoidia made a vague and ungentle voice, probably a welcoming team, to welcome some big shot. It is said that some executives of Kyang can group like pomp and show, and do not go out without dozens of people in front of them. You don't show your status by being surrounded by others. You must pay attention to this when doing business with them. That's right, you don't know enough about the Kyang galaxy. A short Aquarian man waved his tentacles and said with a smile, no matter how pompous the executives of the Kyankan group are, they will never use security soldiers. This group of people are often ridiculed as soldiers in the Kyan galaxy. Only those who are dishonest will submit their resumes to the security bureau. Isn't it self-destructive to use these people to show off their power? Putch, a short but extremely strong camp man simply laughed. That's right. How powerful is it? A young man from my hometown can crush them. Maybe he made some mistake and was punished here for people to watch. Wait a moment for me to take a picture. Several people from an alien galaxy met unexpectedly. The travelers who formed the group laughed and commented on the security soldiers in Area 177, making this group of soldiers who had already exhausted their patience become furious. Some of them even couldn't help but want to lift the blaster in their arms. However, an unusually tall squadron leader wearing black armor shouted sternly, "Stop. Don't forget about business." Although everyone was a little upset, thinking of the order to mobilize everyone to stand here, it was the work of Ziyan, the director of the General Security Bureau. No matter how much thought he put, he could only restrain himself. What's more, the squadron leader's majesty was even greater than Ziyan's. He roared angrily, and no one dared to act rashly. However, the squadron leader can stop his men from acting rashly, but he cannot stop them from thinking wildly. It is precisely because the level of their orders is so high that it makes people curious. Why did Director Zaya personally give the order? Isn't it illegal to give orders beyond the level? A middle-aged squad leader with dusty armor and short stature couldn't help but mutter. Could it be that the case of the former branch director who fled has been implicated in other people? I heard that our director Jin had been flirting with Ning Tao before. Hearing that the content of the discussion was getting more and more outrageous, the leader of the black armored squadron had no choice but to he shouted again, "Shut up. Don't forget that we are on a mission." However, before he finished speaking, a recruit who had just joined the army next to him completely ignored the prohibition and asked curiously, "So what are we here for this time? What are you doing?" The captain of the black armored squadron replied helplessly, "For handover, there is an important prisoner who will be sent to us." What prisoner are you sending here? The recruit was even more surprised when he heard this. Are there not enough prisons in the planetary belt? Even the squadron leader couldn't answer this question. Don't think so much. It's not your turn to worry about things. It's useless to think about it. Wait, it seems that it's finally here. The black armored squadron leader finally relaxed after receiving the message from the tower tone. Looks like I'm just a little late. For this veteran who has experienced hundreds of battles, what he fears most is not powerful enemies, but accidents. Nowadays, their team is almost the only remaining security warrior in Lee. Being transferred to the port by the dignified director of the general administration personally is a huge accident. If there is another accident, the squadron leader feels that his heart will be overwhelmed. However, as the agreed cargo ship continued to approach, the squadron leader discovered something was wrong through the telescope in his helmet. It happened that the young recruit next to him was also looking through the binoculars and murmured, "Why is this ship in such tatters? Only one engine is lit. Has it been robbed by pirates?" After a pause, the recruit put down the binoculars and said, "I always have an ominous premonition." Before he could finish his words, the captain of the black armored squadron slapped the back of his head with a crisp sound. "Stop talking such unlucky nonsense." The squadron leader was a little angry. He felt that he was too gentle in training the recruits, so that they didn't even know what to say and what not to say. The more than 50 people around him are all elite security guards trained by him. Although they all have their own shortcomings, they are well trained and have strict military discipline. Being able to stand still amidst the mocking and sarcastic eyes around the port is an extremely rare quality. It's a pity that I usually forget to teach them to shut up. There are some things you shouldn't say. The next moment, the squadron leader's face darkened, and he gave an order to all his men, "Get ready to fight." Although his soldiers immediately raised their guns to fight, there was also a sound of uncertainty at the same time. Even if they were following him, comrades who had been in arms for many years felt that he was too drunk to be delirious. Accept the challenge? What kind of fight should we fight? In this peaceful world, who does the squadron leader want to fight? Ziyan, the evil director of the general administration? The captain of the black armored squadron could not even feel any resentment when he saw his subordinates being dull. After the security bureau experienced several changes in the past, he, a former star, had become a has-been veteran. The quality of the soldiers assigned to him could not be expected high. So, he didn't care about the surprised reactions of his men, and directly raised his blaster gun, aiming at the giant camel-shaped cargo ship swaying left and right in the distance. Although at this distance, the cargo ship was a small dot in the field of vision, there was no chance of a hit with an ordinary infantry blaster. Not even the sharpshooter who had admired him endlessly on the battlefield could do it. But the important thing is not the result, but the warning effect brought by the shooting. Chapter 120 Escape Route. Next, as long as the squadron leader pulls the trigger, the alarm of the entire port will sound, and the eyes of various organizations and forces in the space city will focus on it, and then each will send its elite soldiers to the scene, to support and maintain order. With the help of those fierce mercenaries and thugs, the squadron leader is sure to suppress any riots. After all, he has been struggling in this space city for nearly 10 years. But as a price, this bizarre space city will fall into great chaos, and the heads of organizations and political leaders with ulterior motives will try to fish in troubled waters. What is more fatal is the impact on the outside world. Those traveling merchants who thought that Lee was a peaceful and prosperous space city will immediately see the dark side behind this city. That will be an unbearable price for the entire Lee. Therefore, the squadron leader's hand holding the gun also trembled slightly. If it is proved that everything is his illusion, then the best outcome for him is to spend the rest of his life in a secret prison in the asteroid belt, DUI, and the biggest possibility is that he will be torn to pieces by the angry local forces. But the next moment, the squadron leader pulled the trigger without hesitation, causing a light blue energy beam to shoot out. He had fought for many years and never doubted his intuition. His comrades who had fought side by side with him died or betrayed him. He was the only one who could survive until now, relying on his trust in his intuition at the critical moment. Since he had determined that there was something wrong with the shabby cargo ship, there was no need to hesitate. Even if the final result was really wrong, it would only mean giving up a life. that should have been given up long ago. With such a determination to risk everything, the squadron leader was somewhat surprised to see the result of the shooting. It seemed to be luck, and it seemed to be the result of years of honing skills. The light blue energy beam actually hit the distant giant camel-shaped cargo ship. The almost miraculous result surprised the squadron leader. However, before the alarm sounded at the port, the squadron leader saw the giant camel-shaped cargo ship in the distance explode with a loud bang, and a shocking flame burst out from the tail, and then the spaceship shook violently and tilted to the side. The squadron leader looked at the exploding spaceship in disbelief, and then looked at the blaster in his hand. He felt that the rich experience brought by his many years of fighting career had become a joke at this moment. When did the blaster become so awesome? Exclamation mark. The new recruit beside him was so shocked that he dropped his telescope and stammered, "Captain, where did you buy this gun?" The soldiers around him, who were standing as solemnly as stone sculptures, also gathered around, as if they were rushing to watch the squadron leader's gun. "Stop," the squadron leader ordered, but he calmed down before anyone else and realized the truth of the situation. Of course, the blaster could not be so far away. It would be a joke to blow up a giant camel-shaped cargo ship. The weak energy beam was a joke to shake the deflector shield. Then it could only be that there was something wrong with the spaceship itself, and the accident happened just when it passed the defense circle of Lee and was about to dock. Could it be a coincidence? There are not so many coincidences in the world, and even if it was a coincidence, the current situation did not allow him to come according to the original plan. The squadron leader stared at the rapidly tilting spaceship, predicting where it would fall, and soon his face became even gloomier. He picked up the communicator and notified the tower. "Let Chiangsaen District 9 prepare for the impact. The spaceship is about to hit." Then, he waved his hands to his men. "What are you still standing there for? Go to the scene." In the rapidly falling giant camel-shaped cargo ship, Scene was still standing in the most dangerous bow bridge, holding the welded control stick tightly with both hands, trying his best to control the landing point of the spaceship. Since he had made up his mind to avoid the port's net by accidentally falling the spaceship, he naturally had to choose a place suitable for rapid escape and hiding after landing. In addition, Scene also hoped to minimize casualties as much as possible. After Scene's repeated consideration, the most suitable landing point was Chiangsaen District 9. As the last ranked area in the core area of Chiangsaen District, District 9 can be said to be the most chaotic in Chiangsaen District. When it was first established, it was to expand the area of Chiangsaen District to accommodate those small merchants who could not afford to settle down in the core area as a necessary supplement to the commercial business of Lee. When the 9th district was prosperous, those exquisite shops with their own ingenuity and the hotels and houses interspersed among them were even as gorgeous as the Chiangsaen Jade building under the light. However, as the development of Space City entered a bottleneck, the expansion of Chiangsaen District quickly turned cold. With the migration of merchants and the outflow of funds, the peripheral areas gradually lost control and became a paradise for rundown merchants and even gangsters. After several rectifications, although the public security has improved significantly, the popularity still plummeted. Not long ago, the newly appointed head of the 9th district planned to revitalize the 9th district and compete with the former 8 districts for business flow, and even openly hostile to the Lord of Chiangsaen District for this. Such a strong style has attracted some merchants and idlers disguised as merchants to settle here, gathering a wave of popularity. Unfortunately, the person in charge of the district died suddenly and mysteriously not long after, causing the popularity that District 9 had finally gathered to disperse. Now, from the sky, the once prosperous buildings have been abandoned in large areas, and they look lonely when illuminated by the lights in the distance. And this is exactly what Scene wants. Those prosperous areas are mostly densely populated. Once the spacecraft falls, it will inevitably cause heavy casualties. Moreover, with Lee's emphasis on the core area of Chiangsaen District, if Scene really dares to move the spacecraft there, he will most likely be blown up in midair by the defensive artillery fire in the space city. Only a dilapidated area like District 9 will be ignored, and the spacecraft will be allowed to crash. And only Chiangsaen District 9, a place that Scene has been to once, can provide him with enough shelter to allow him to escape. Chapter 121 Overlooked. The cargo ship fell very fast, and almost in the blink of an eye, the scattered lights of Shiangsu and District 9 were right in front of us. At this time, Scene still did not leave the bridge, seeming to control the spacecraft until the last moment. At this time, he couldn't leave. Even if it was too late to turn back to the middle and rear of the spacecraft, it was better to prepare for the collision here. Although the giant camel-shaped spacecraft is top-heavy, the heavy bow must bear the brunt when it falls. However, in fact, the bow of this kind of cargo ship, which is known for its solid skin, is the strongest part of the entire cargo ship. However, it lacks internal buffering and shock-absorbing devices. The impact of the accident can only be absorbed by the crew themselves. For ordinary people, this is a serious injury that is likely to be fatal, but with the Jedi apprentice's tempered physique, the injury can most likely be controlled to a minor injury. This is also Scene's biggest reliance on being able to hold on to the last moment on the bow bridge. It's just, Scene glanced at the two robots that were still at their posts and said sorry to them softly in his heart. The next moment, the ground shook. Although Shiangsu and District 9 is dilapidated, there are still many residents staying here. At this time, they heard strange noises and came out of their houses one after another, looking up into the distance. I saw that the Star Tower, which was once notorious in the 9th district, had now become a ruin. A top-heavy cargo ship was twisting its hull and falling into the rubble, dragging behind it a long friction trail. Damn it, what are you doing? A homeless man covered in dust stared at the dust gradually rising, and the cake he had finally dug out of the trash can fell to the ground. He quickly picked up the cake, dusted it off, and put it into his mouth again, not paying much attention to the strange changes in the distance. Having lived in District 9 for a long time, I have become accustomed to all kinds of beatings and killings. Although the rare incident of a cargo ship hitting a building is indeed the first time I have seen it, if you think about it carefully, what does it have to do with him as a homeless man? Kwangxing Tower is a famous and fierce place in the entire 9 districts. How can ordinary people dare to approach it casually? Besides, what's the benefit of being closer? Not long ago, Kwangxing Tower was occupied by a group of thieves called Jade Rats, and many small gang organizations in the surrounding areas were wiped out in an instant. Not long after the Jade Rat was proud, it was beaten to pieces by a group of unknown murderers. It was now land without an owner, and all the good things in the building had been looted. As for the crashed cargo ship, maybe there are many treasures, but the tramp also knows that it is definitely not his treasure. His treasure is only the dusty cake in his hand. However, just when the cake is about to enter his mouth, the tramp suddenly feels there was a strong collision from behind, and the cake fell to the ground again, staggering, and stepped on it involuntarily. At this moment, even the homeless man felt furious, but the moment he turned around, his anger disappeared. Behind him was a security warrior wearing black armor. He was tall and burly, bringing a strong sense of oppression like a towering mountain. Behind the warrior, there were more than 50 equally solemn subordinates following closely. The homeless man was stunned, then trembling. Seeing his stupidity, the black-armored warrior simply stretched out his hand and pushed him, pushing the homeless man directly into the garbage pile at the corner of the street. Don't get in the way, this is not where you should be. After giving a cold warning, the black-armored warrior stepped forward with a steady pace, as if the front was not a battlefield, but just his own garden. The subordinates behind him were not as calm as they were. Although the queue was neat, they were already letting themselves go in their words. Captain, you have to take care of homeless people in District 9. Are you too kind? Isn't it bad to let him just stand there and die from a stray bullet? Only by killing more people can we apply for more security from our superiors. Funds. Idiot, it's not our turn to get a promotion or salary increase if the head of District 9 dies. It's good if we don't deduct bonuses. I said, this time a spaceship crashed in Shiangsu District. Is it a major safety accident? We won't be laid off, right? It's okay. If you are laid off, you can work as a private security guard. Maybe the salary will be better. The captain of the black armored squadron who was walking at the front no longer even thought of stopping his subordinates. This group of ruffian-like security soldiers would talk more nonsense the closer they got to the battle. A stubborn disease that won't go away. However, it is better to be able to speak than to die in silence and never be able to say a word. Listening to the constant noise of his subordinates in his ears, the squadron leader himself felt a little relieved. After so many years, the biggest fear in his heart was that he was clearly on the battlefield, but could not hear the voices of his comrades in his ears. However, as the noise continued behind them, the squadron leader suddenly raised his hand, causing everyone to stop talking. Be careful. Just as the squadron leader blurted out his warning, everyone was stunned to see two figures suddenly break through the wall and rush out one after the other from the Star Tower, which was mostly destroyed by the cargo ship, to the street. The person in front was thin and his body was wrapped in black clothes. He stepped back with his back, but his movements were incredibly light and swift, faster than ordinary people running head on. Then a person strode forward to pursue him. He was slightly taller, his grey robe was stained with dust, and there were faint traces of blood on his body. But running like wild beasts and chariots, it has irresistible deterrent power. As the two of them rushed out of the Star Building, a burst of shrill laughter spread throughout the streets. Ha 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 ha, you seem to be smart and witty, but your brain capacity is very limited. You can calculate the east and west, and you can even calculate the landing point of the spacecraft clearly, but you missed me? Are you looking down on people too much? Zazi flew back, mocking the opponent in front of him unscrupulously. Cold light flashed between his fingers, sometimes ejecting the flying blade to hurt the enemy, and sometimes just using the sharp blade to reflect the light to bully the enemy. His dexterity and cunning made it difficult to guard against. However, his opponent was not confused by it at all, and his sharp eyes accurately identified every change of Zazi's fingertips. The flying blades that were ejected were slapped by him casually, like floating dust. The flash of light used to disturb the enemy could not make him blink, even if it hit his pupils directly. Scene rushed straight towards Zazi with an extremely decisive attitude, as fast as lightning. Before Zazi's laughter could stop, the Jedi apprentice's shoulder had already hit Zazi's chest. Then the laughter stopped abruptly, and Zazi flew out like a rag, hitting an abandoned house heavily with her body, and then passed through the wall. Scene didn't feel happy at all, but still stepped forward, preparing to grab Zazi again from the rubble of the broken wall. Chapter 122 Eye-opening. Scene had indeed underestimated Zazi, and the vigorous vitality of this madman. He had beaten Zazi to the point of breaking bones, and choking and fainting in the corridor of the cargo ship. He looked like a half-dead man. Afterwards, the impact of the crash of the spaceship was so strong that even he, a Jedi apprentice, was shaken to the point of having his internal organs dislocated, and stars flashing before his eyes. Zazi, lying in the corridor with no one to take care of her, could almost be considered a corpse. So, when Scene struggled to get out of the wreckage of the bow, and prepared to flee the scene, he did not expect a sharp dagger to stab him from behind. At the critical moment, the sharp intuition given to him by the Force allowed him to barely avoid the vital points. The dagger only cut a long wound on his side, and Scene's full strength counterattack almost separated Zazi's head from his body. It was a pity that it was only almost after all. When Scene was attacked and wounded, he naturally would not hold back. When he turned back to fight back, he subconsciously wanted to kill Zazi with his lightsaber. However, when he swung his arm to try to draw the sword, he was shocked to find that the lightsaber on his waist had disappeared. It turned out that Zazi had stolen the lightsaber tied to Scene's belt at the moment of the close attack, so the must-win attack could only be simplified into a backhand punch. Although Zazi was hit on the shoulder and the sound of bones breaking was heard, he took advantage of the momentum to fly back with a long laugh, holding Scene's lightsaber in his hand, shook it to show off, and then threw it far away. This trick of disturbing the enemy was originally just a joke for the Jedi apprentice. With the help of the Force, Scene could easily retrieve the lightsaber from a distance. However, the strong impact of the spacecraft crash, and the wound on his waist, caused by the dagger made him dizzy for a while, and he could not accurately lock the lightsaber. For a Jedi apprentice, a lightsaber is the most important weapon that cannot be lost, but now he can only watch it fall into some unknown corner of the ruins. But Scene quickly shook his head, forcing himself to wake up, not caring about the lightsaber in the ruins, and only firmly locked the thin but rampant figure in his vision. Since he boarded the cargo ship, He has suffered too many losses from Zazi, so the Jedi apprentice will never repeat the same mistake again. The lost lightsaber is closely related to him. Even if it is lost for a while, it is easy to find it back, but if Zazi is left alone, the consequences will be unimaginable. Therefore, even though he was seriously injured, and the lost lightsaber made him worry about it, he had made up his mind to eliminate all evil, so he endured the pain and dizziness and strode forward. In Zazi's mocking laughter, he was hit again, and his tendons and bones were broken, and he fell into the ruins. Next, what Scene had to do was a matter of course. The Jedi apprentice did not feel any negative emotions such as anger or humiliation in his heart. Although the various tricks of the perverted killer had troubled his mind for a time, he was particularly sober at this time. He knew very well what he was going to do, and had no hesitation in his heart. However, just when Scene was about to step forward and eliminate the trouble forever, he suddenly felt a strong sense of crisis coming from his side. He turned his head slightly and saw the neatly armored security squadron on the empty street, and the blaster in the hands of the black armored squadron leader. "Stop, don't move," the squadron leader shouted in a voice that shocked the entire block, and the blaster aimed at Scene's feet and fired without hesitation. Scene frowned and quickly weighed the way forward and retreat in his mind. But this weighing only lasted for a moment, and he stepped forward without hesitation. Even if he was facing the concentrated fire of a squadron of security soldiers, he would never let Zazi go. He had a hunch that, if he didn't understand Zazi at this time, the price he would have to pay later would be much heavier. Good choice, kid. At the same time, the captain in black armor couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He and his men had just arrived, and when they saw the cargo ship crash and the fight between the two, they were actually completely confused. Which side was the enemy? Which side was the friend? Or both sides were enemies? It was completely unclear for a while. So Scene's act of disobeying orders immediately helped the captain to distinguish between the enemy and us. Let's not talk about the thin man lying in the ruins. The young man who dared to disobey orders must not be a good person. Dare not listen to the words of Kyankan security? Don't you know your last name? In this space city, anyone with common sense should know you can disobey anyone, but you must not disobey Kyankan security. Although the number of security fighters in this city is scarce, and they can't be relied on for many problems, most of the time the city's public security relies on the thugs of various forces. But as long as the man in black armor leads the team, no one can question his judgment, not even the owner of the space city. It is said that this warrior who is always wearing black armor has the best skills in the entire galaxy. He has made great achievements in many battles, and has killed countless bandits and rebels. The reason why he has been in the position of squadron leader for many years, and has not been promoted, is because he once killed a fatuous group director and Space City Lord out of his patience. It is difficult to tell whether this legend is true or not, but now, the Black Armor Squadron leader is using his decisive killing on Scene. After distinguishing the enemy and us, the squadron leader aimed at Scene without hesitation and fired. The men behind him laughed and laughed, while raising their guns, and firing continuously in tacit understanding. For a while, the energy beams hit Scene like a rainstorm. But the next moment, the security soldiers froze on the spot, as if they had seen a ghost, and the recruits with poor psychological quality even raised their guns directly to the sky. Because the volleys that these soldiers were determined to win were all missed in an incredible way. The rebellious young man seemed to have foreseen the future. At the moment, when the soldiers opened fire, he rushed forward with lightning speed, and jumped several meters. The focused energy rain was thrown behind him one after another, and even the corners of his clothes could not be touched. What was even more exaggerated was that some energy beams that were deliberately scattered to block the way were also avoided by Scene by lowering his head or twisting his waist at the last moment. The whole process seemed like a performance that had been carefully rehearsed many times. Seeing Scene recovering his body in midair, tapping the ground with his toes, and charging forward again, even the squadron leader with the most combat experience couldn't help but shrink his pupils, feeling a chill on his back, and the blaster in his hand was a little unstable. What kind of monster is this? Question mark? How could there be such a ridiculous thing? Exclamation mark. And just in this moment of distraction, the security soldiers lost their last chance to pursue. Scene endured the dizziness and stepped forward again, rushing into the ruins that Zazie had knocked out. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123. Don't chase the enemy. As expected, Scene lost sight of Zazie in the rubble. The skinny assassin had amazing skills in hiding his tracks. On the other hand, after Scene had managed to avoid a round of volleys, his dizziness had deteriorated into uncontrollable pain. His condition had fallen to the lowest point, and it was difficult for him to chase Zazie. So when he stepped into the ruins without hesitation, he was in a dilemma of looking around in confusion. Fortunately, this was also expected. Since Scene could not see Zazie, he simply ignored her and walked forward calmly, directly through the abandoned building, preparing to escape through the opposite window. His steps were slightly staggering, but his posture was firm, as if nothing could stop him. Even the lightsaber, that symbolized his Jedi identity, but was thrown into the ruins by Zazie, could be ignored. 1 step, 2 steps. Scene's steps became faster and faster, until he climbed over the window and his figure was about to completely disappear in the shadow of the night behind the ruins, and finally he heard the long-awaited soft TSK behind him. TSK, sorry to have kept you waiting. Along with it came the chill of a sharp weapon piercing his coat and hitting his skin. Before that, Scene had not noticed the existence of his opponent at all. But almost at the same time, Scene suddenly twisted his body and swung his arm backwards, his arm like a sweeping warhammer, making a fierce sound of wind. As expected, Scene's swing and heavy attack missed, but while swinging his arm, he released a more powerful and heavy impact with the force. With the distortion of light caused by the rapid compression of the air, the assassin hiding in the shadows was hit backward by the oncoming huge force. His body broke through the window frame and fell into the rubble like a weed. And the sharp blade, that was only a hair away from piercing Scene's skin, also fell at Scene's feet. Scene turned around without hesitation, crossed the broken window, and chased Zazie in the ruins. Just now, he pretended to run away, to lure Zazie to take the initiative. In fact, it was a high-risk gamble. If Zazie didn't fall for it and really let him run away, Scene would immediately fall into a dilemma. Fortunately, Zazie couldn't help but take action after all, and the timing was exactly the same as Scene's, which gave Scene the only chance to turn the tide. Click. Scene took a step down and crushed several bricks and stones in the ruins, which also made his body finally start to stagger. But he still gritted his teeth and insisted on taking the last step forward, reaching out his hand, ready to catch the assassin. But at this moment, a completely unexpected figure appeared in his peripheral vision. It was the security soldier in black armor. He sprinted all the way at an incredible speed. The dark figure was like a ghost in the night, and only the jet backpack behind him was shining brightly. And when he flashed into Scene's field of vision, several energy beams shot out from his gun without mercy. Scene never expected that the black armored warrior would come so quickly. His mind was completely focused on Zazie, so he was not on guard at all. At the critical moment, he barely twisted his body to avoid the vital parts, but was still rubbed by the burning energy beam on his shoulders and thighs. The intense pain made his muscles twitch uncontrollably. For a moment, Scene felt that his brain was almost blank, and his body fell down. In an instant, Scene bit the tip of his tongue fiercely. This was the battlefield remedy that Zubo told him, to cover the pain with pain to regain consciousness. At the same time, he turned his outstretched hand and supported his body downwards. After a moment of support, the Jedi apprentice regained control of his body. He endured the pain and turned to escape from the window. Want to leave? What a joke. The captain of the black armored squadron felt that he was really underestimated. He actually arrested the fugitive in front of him? Did he think he was a shooting cripple who could miss within 10 meters? Didn't those few shots just now teach him a lesson? However, just as the captain was about to fire again, he saw Scene's right hand reach out from his waist, and then a red energy beam came towards him, hitting the blaster in his hand. Before he could react, breaking the gun he maintained daily and cherished very much. Explode. After a swear word, the captain was stunned. He wanted to take out the pistol from his waist to chase him, but Scene had already escaped along the broken window without a trace. Until this time, his useless men finally came late, accompanied by the sound of tiny footsteps and headache-inducing noise. Captain, next time, give us a set of this jetpack. Don't just use it alone. Your single rider charge tactic is too dangerous. The brothers can't keep up and can't protect you. Yes, it doesn't matter if you die, but what if no one pays us? However, when these noisy people finally passed the hole in the building and saw the scene inside, they all shut up at the same time. After a while, someone asked, "Hey, Captain, where are the people?" The squadron leader spat in annoyance. "They ran away." "Ah, ran away." An old soldier in dusty armor widened his eyes in disbelief. "They can even run away? Captain, your health is getting worse day by day. Isn't it time to consider retirement?" Another sharp-eyed person saw the half-broken gun in the captain's hand and was even more incredible. "Captain, you lost the gunfight? Impossible." Someone immediately shouted, "Didn't they say that in this kind of one-on-one gunfight, the captain will only lose to women?" Explode. The squadron leader couldn't help but swear again, then pulled out the pistol at his waist and fired at the feet of the group of soldiers under his command, finally making everyone shut up completely. And he was too lazy to explain the lightning-fast duel and the confusion brought to him by Scene's amazing gun drawing and rapid shooting. The squadron leader simply glanced around and said, "Let's clean up the scene first. There should be some people still alive in the spaceship. Rescue those who need to be rescued, and arrest those who need to be arrested." Someone immediately added, "What about the one who escaped?" The squadron leader pondered for a moment and said, "It should be impossible to catch up with him now, and don't chase after a desperate enemy." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a cheer behind him. "Captain, you finally got it. Don't chase after a desperate enemy." What a good saying, to justify refusing to work and slacking off so well. No wonder he can get to the level of squadron leader after working hard for decades. Of course, the noise was interrupted by another burst of gunfire. The squadron leader scolded, "If you keep talking nonsense, you will all be sent to the asteroid belt to collect ice." His subordinates wanted to say that, even if they went to collect ice for the Chen family, the treatment was actually better than being a security guard in Lee. But the carbon marks on the ground were still curling up, so everyone knew it was better to keep quiet. Chapter 124 Convenient Silencing. The squadron leader made his men shut up before he could arrange the task smoothly. He divided his men into several groups. The largest group was responsible for cleaning and sealing the scene and expelling all the ruffians and vagrants who liked to join in the fun. The next group went to the wreckage of the cargo ship, searched for survivors, and collected relevant evidence. A few slick and flexible ones were responsible for contacting the bosses of several nearby gangs to make them restrain themselves. Only a small soldier who was the most trusted by the squadron leader stayed with the squadron leader to investigate the truth of the spacecraft crash. However, being the most trusted also often means being the least taboo when speaking. This small soldier who always remained silent and kept silent when everyone else was noisy and laughing suddenly said, "Captain, I need to remind you again. We are just security personnel. In theory, we don't have to do anything except killing and arson. Where did this spaceship come from? Why did it fall? Whether the people on the ship were dead or alive after it fell, and who the two people who just fought were, these have nothing to do with us." The squadron leader scanned the scene and nodded to indicate that he was listening. The short man continued to advise, "To be precise, given our position in Lee, the fewer things that concern us, the better. Although in theory there are many security responsibilities, in fact, for this city, and even for the people in the branch and headquarters, it is best for us to stay in the camp and play cards every day. At most, you will get a bad review in the performance appraisal, and then you, Captain, will have to make a supplementary self-criticism." The squadron leader smiled and said nothing. As for the salary and benefits, in such an environment, if we just do less work, there will be many people willing to double the performance bonus we deducted. This money comes safely and generously, and it is definitely much more cost effective than you're asking questions like this. The squadron leader spoke for the first time. "Are you short of money recently? Because of your girlfriend?" When you go back later, go find Boss Peng of the Snake Gang and tell him that if he doesn't want his enemies to know about the business in the north, he should show his attitude." The little man smiled bitterly. "Captain, I don't mean that." But before he finished speaking, he saw that the squadron leader had already walked towards the body lying in the ruins. It was obvious that he had made up his mind and could not be persuaded. In the whole incident, the biggest doubt was about two people. One ran away and the other was laying. Then the problem naturally fell on the person laying. As he walked, he was also observing the dead body on the ground. He was not tall, thin, and small. A tight black suit almost covered his whole body, leaving only his arms and a flat face exposed. Judging from the marks on his body, he had experienced more than one extremely intense battle, and his body was already riddled with holes. In fact, the squadron leader had just seen this thin man act as a human door-breaking hammer, and broke through a thick wall. Logically, there should be few intact bones left on his body at this time. And his cold and stiff body was a proof of his death. But for some reason, the squadron leader could not let down his guard. The muscles on his back twitched. It was not known whether it was the impact of the inferior jetpack or the old injury from many years ago that reminded him of the impending crisis. After thinking for a moment, the squadron leader decided to trust his intuition. He dropped his right hand to his waist. The pistol that had been with him for more than 10 years always gave him a sense of security, unless he was facing the person who taught him how to draw a gun. However, just as the squadron leader was about to pull the trigger, a slightly weird ring suddenly rang out in the ruins. A rough electronic sound played a funny rhythmic song. It was the theme song of a popular TV show, which was very popular among children. But it sounded creepy in the ruins. The little soldier's hair almost stood up, and the blaster in his hand was aimed directly at the source of the sound. It was the chest of the corpse lying in the ruins. The squadron leader immediately reached out to stop him. Unlike his subordinates, he was relieved when the bell rang. Then, the corpse on the ground suddenly trembled, as if the chest was electrocuted, and this tremor also brought vitality to the stiff body. Zazi opened his eyes, and a smile rippled on his flat face. He reached his hand to his chest, and his fingers drilled a slit in the pocket on the smooth black clothes, and then took out a communicator that was flat-ended one corner, but still working tenaciously. Pressing the button, Zazi connected the communication. A slightly distorted voice sounded from the communicator. "Zazi, what on earth are you doing?" This voice made the few security soldiers present stiffen at the same time, or rather, any soldier of Kyankan security would feel a little uncomfortable when hearing this voice. This was the voice of Zayan, the director of the General Security Bureau. For those of them who were struggling on the front line, this person's voice could only be heard on TV and radio. The short soldier reached out and pulled the squadron leader's arm, but the latter shook it off lightly. At this point, it was too late to run. Zazi also turned his eyes to the black armored squadron leader with a complicated expression, and a malicious smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then, he didn't mind that there were people watching him, and said directly to Zayan, "Brother, you always start with the same words every time you come to me. Don't you think you are very stupid? Stop talking nonsense. What's going on with Lee? You promised me that there would be no mistakes before I allowed you to." Zazi interrupted directly. "Is there anything wrong now?" Zayan's roar almost paralyzed the communicator. "The cargo ship crashed in Chiangsaen district. Tell me where the mistake is." Zazi asked back, "What's wrong with the crash? Did it crash in the core area? Did many people die? Did it affect anyone? Do you care about these issues? Do you need me to create a massacre to cover up the crash?" A series of questions seemed to make Zazi the one who was right and confident, and the last threat was even more horrifying. The silence in the communicator seemed to mean that Zayan acquiesced to this unreasonable trouble. After a moment, Zayan's voice became more restrained and a little dull. "How is that person? Which person? Are you talking about the Jedi apprentice?" Hearing the word Jedi apprentice, all the security fighters present were stunned. Due to the information blockade of the Kyankan group, this word is slightly unfamiliar to most people in the Kyan galaxy and the Outer Ring. Only the captain in black armor clenched his fists. On the other end of the communicator, Zayan's breathing also stagnated for a while, and then he asked, "There is no one else around you, right?" Zazi smiled and said, brother, after so many years, why do you still have a fluke mentality with me? I deliberately said the sensitive word, of course, because there are people around me, so it is convenient to silence them later. Ha ha ha. Chapter 125 Impeccable. When the word silence was spoken, Zazi suddenly opened his eyes. There seemed to be endless terror in his narrow eyes, which forced the captain of the Black Armor Squadron to raise his gun to confront him. But the captain did not choose to strike first. After all, the other end of the communicator was the powerful security director. Ziyan could only suppress his anger and feel helpless. After all, the other end of the communicator was the lawless Zazi. Since you told me so, there must be someone around you who is inconvenient to silence. Who is it? Zazi smiled and said, there is a survivor of the DUI 8848 tragedy 10 years ago. I think it would be easier to silence him. Ziyan was silent for a while and sighed. It's Ziyang. That doesn't matter. He knows what to say and what not to say. As for the others, you can do it yourself. Zazi nodded. Got it. The moment the voice fell, Zazi's fingertips burst into a cold light, shooting at the small soldier with a flickering eye. But at the same time, the captain of the Black Armored Squadron named Ziyang also pulled the trigger, accurately shooting the flying blade from mid-air. Ziyang said coldly, don't even think about it. Zazi shook his finger indifferently, indicating that it was just a greeting, and not to take it too seriously. At this time, Ziyan's voice came from the communicator. How is the Jedi apprentice? I'll let him run away. F***CK. A series of swear words came out, as if they were going to burst the communicator, but Zazi just listened with a smile and said nothing. Ziyan didn't speak until all his strength was gone with the swear words, before he finally said, you'd better have a plausible reason. Zazi got serious this time. I'd like to ask you the reason why you don't do this. What good will it do for you to lock up that Jedi apprentice? Don't ask questions when you already know the answer. Zazi said, you just want to use the apprentice to threaten the master and force her to submit, but don't you think this idea is ridiculous? What happened the last time you used this trick to threaten her? How does it feel to have another VIP in your family who can't be hurt or touched and has to be extracted for information by her every day? A series of taunts made the man on the other end of the communicator even more angry. So we need a turning point now. Do you mean a sudden turn for the worse? Wake up. Do you really think that, by controlling that little guy, you can threaten Mostima? You've suffered so many losses, but you still don't know how to learn your lessons. That's why you haven't been able to get on the board of directors for all these years. Zazi's tone was cheerful, as if it was a blessing that his brother could not enter the board of directors. Ziyan was also used to it. He was angry in his heart, but he was still able to suppress it and asked, then what do you want to do? Zazi said, it's useless to deal with GD by force. You should have learned a lot during this period of time. Hey. Thinking of the loss he suffered at the hands of Mostima during this period of time, Ziyan couldn't help but feel his temples throbbing. She is not afraid of threats, torture, or sweet talk. Any conspiracy will be seen through by her, and even used in reverse. Such an opponent is not only impeccable, but also omnipresent. Ziyan has suffered a lot during this period of time. Do you have any good ideas? Zazi smiled and said, I'm sorry, if you are targeting that woman, my only suggestion is that you all turn yourself in as soon as possible and strive for leniency from the Republic. Don't talk nonsense. But I do have some ideas for that little guy. Before he finished speaking, Ziyan couldn't help but sneered. Your idea is to let him crash the cargo ship in the space city and then escape. Yes, otherwise how do you think he can get away? Zazi said lightly, after I met that kid, I knew that the original plan would not work. He is as unpredictable as his master, and his willpower is at least 10 times that of ordinary people, so it is impossible to force him to commit suicide. So what? You think there's nothing you can do about it, so why not let him go, and then expect him to be grateful to us? Brother, let me emphasize again that your ability to sit in the position of director of the general administration has nothing to do with your intelligence, so don't use your brain for nothing, and don't talk nonsense. There are many people listening to our conversation. If everyone in the security bureau knows that you are such a mentally retarded person, I will probably kill you. You. In the current situation, Seen is the only breakthrough point, and although he has a strong will, his mind is too flexible. This is his fatal flaw. Yan was puzzled. What's wrong with having a flexible mind? People who are too flexible tend to think too much. If they think too much, it is difficult for them to have a strong will, especially those who are born with extreme positions. What do you mean? Don't you understand this? Zazi said. Then think about this question. Are you a good person? What the hell are you asking suddenly? Yan cursed, but still answered honestly, I'm indeed not a good person, but in my position, I'm afraid even a good person can't sit still. Zazi said, then you are a bad person? Yan became more and more impatient. It's okay to say that I'm a bad guy, but without me, I don't know who can lead the group's security and force the various branches to do their work honestly. Without Kyankan security, I want to see how the hundreds of billions of civilians in this galaxy can live a stable life. Zazi said, look, even a fool like you knows that good and evil cannot be simply divided, and moral ideals must always give way to reality. But some people can't tolerate the slightest bit of sand in their eyes. Such people are either born fools or rookies who have never opened their eyes. And now, what I have to do is to make that Scene open his eyes and cleanse his brain. Zazi's tone became more and more cheerful when he said this. He regards himself as righteous, so I will let him think about what justice is. He is based on kindness, so I will let him think clearly about the price of kindness. He is a smart man and will definitely find the answers to these questions. But when he finds the answers, he will find that he has long been away from justice and kindness. After this, Yan was silent for a long time. Then he asked, according to what you said, there should be no kind and smart people in the world. But what about Mostima? Zazi said, she is a GD master, and Scene is just a little apprentice. Facing Mostima, we have no chance to ask such stupid questions, and she will not bother to answer. So while Scene is still young, we have to act quickly. If we wait until Scene really thinks it all through, then we will have one more invulnerable enemy. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.